That was me telling you I was
Broadcast is
here.
live. Eric was in the private chat telling us he was
Gotcha.
here.
Well, he did say the broadcast is live for you guys that keep track of this stuff.
I never say
Oh,
that
there
when
we
I'm
go.
hosting the show because it says something. It actually comes up on the screen. The broadcast is live for us. For the host, it just says you are live or something. It's like nowhere near as exciting.
Right, you are live because it's your show on your channel. If to somebody else who's just a visitor is just letting you know that you're going live, but it's not your it's not our broadcast. It's just yours.
If you're gonna fart, everyone's gonna hear it.
That's how you clear the room so you can get to the secret market of the
That's
anyway.
how you keep the dollar boxes clear around you when you're digging in them.
So you're not imagining the Cavern of Chaos show has appeared on the Howler Mouse channel. We figured out that 2 years ago would have been, we missed an anniversary, but I'm sorry. You know, he didn't kick me out. You can see we got like a full house tonight. We got Paolo, we got Jared Osborne, we got Eric Breen, and I want you to see that this is the Howler Mouse channel because we've confirmed he gets around. You know how it is. And then we all got our jimmies on. That's all I'm saying. And then we got Graphic Man. So we got some. I like this, man. We got Cavern of Chaos. We got some fossils on the fossil show. Graphic Man. You know, mix. It's like a cosmic crossover, if you will.
Mind the Comics is here. Hello.
Hey.
The comics used to call it when worlds collide.
When we're, I'm now. See now, I was at work. I set it up. I was like, I need a title, and that would have been perfect. I'm gonna build it in here. So,
well, I think Paulo's like the bridge that kind of binds everything together, really.
Well, seeing as Eric Breen is the only one that actually knows everybody because it's always if I show up in a chat that I've never been to, there he is.
Nice. I think Breen's the one that'll have people having to double check what channel they're on. So,
yeah.
If you go to Jared Osborne's channel where the show takes place now, I popped in one time because I think I woke up from a nap, and when I got on here, you had Sleepy Reader on, and I had to I was like, where the hell am I?
Yeah. That was the night I was alone for the first half an hour. So Sleepy happened to be free and came on.
Oh, right. Okay. I got somebody local here. Hello, Gabriel. What's going on? Well, Gabriel, since you're local, I'm just going to let you know we're just going to BS around, give people a chance to catch up. And we actually came up with a few topics. And as far as this channel here, the Howler Mouse channel, I'm like Woody Allen. My older stuff, my older movies, my older videos are better. All right. Nice to meet you, Gabriel. Okay. Well, in my area, like I've told y'all before, we have a lot of flooding going on. So it looks like I may be Howler headroom here, going for a little bit here. And then we got Pal over in Portugal. We got New York State over there. You guys are in Kentucky?
He is.
Eric Breen is in Kentucky, and you're in Missouri, right?
Missouri, yep.
Yeah. Okay, so we get her. All right, man. So Jared got a little ambivalence with us, a little of that, saying that he had a topic about the Watchmen and the Sandman because I put up the video where I was all giddy. I shouldn't have been on camera.
I just had an observation that I really hadn't thought of before about both of those comics where because you got those both, you got Sandman #1 and Watchmen #1 in the dollar bin kind of.
Sandman 2 and up. I misspoke on Instagram.
Okay, Sandman 2. And that got me to thinking Watchmen #1 might be the most undervalued book of the 1980s, and Sandman #1 might be the most undervalued book of the 1990s compared to their sales and impact on the comic industry. I hardly see anyone collecting those books. I've seen more people show off Hulk 181 on YouTube than Watchmen #1 or Sandman #1. It's more, and it's no one. I don't think I've ever seen either of them in a slab on YouTube. It's and I think it might be just because people mostly read them in trade paperbacks. Maybe I would say the vast majority of Watchmen and Sandman fans don't care about the comics because they bought them and read them in trade paperbacks.
Right, they wouldn't.
In my head,
Is people want to read Watchmen and Sandman are the people who are into comics because they want to read them.
Yeah,
Those are considered the modern classics. They're
right.
So they should still be easy to read, even for people who say that back in olden days the comics used to have too much text. But those are still very 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 readable, and they're always available. If you have a comic that's available anywhere in North America, it's Watchmen, and it's the 10 volumes of Sandman.
But also like the spec guys and they collect just for value guys are all over everything.
Yeah.
How come they're not all over? It's just weird that they're not all over Sandman and Watchmen. Watchmen was even a TV show. Sandman's a TV show now. I don't see anybody specking on it.
How large was the print run of Watchmen, though?
Big.
Yeah,
I mean, it was a big print run, but
yeah.
compared to the Watchmen fans out there, I think it was a small print run. Like the Watchmen has sold many, many more copies in trade paperback than in.
Well, it's never been out of print. The trade has made top 10 New York Times bestseller list a few times. They actually use it in colleges. You know what I mean?
Right. It's just weird to me that like nobody is like, "Ooh, I just got You're the only one I saw giddy about getting Watchmen #1.
Well, it's like my third one. You know, I mean,
I know.
And almost all my Watchmen I got for $1, every one of them, starting in the 1990s. You know,
it's important for you in that regard because it's something that came out while you were a regular reader,
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could pick it up as it was coming out. To the rest of us, it came a little later. If there's a trade, buy the trade, especially because there's one thing. This, even though it's a 12-issue miniseries, it's actually a graphic novel. People talk about that the graphic novel must be an all original work. I don't define it like that. If the story is conceived having a beginning, middle, and end, and it's longer than a regular size comic magazine, it's a graphic novel. Watchmen was conceived as a graphic novel, so people want it. They don't care about #1. They want everything, and since everything is in the trade, including the text pieces that you claim you never read, which I don't believe.
Well, you know, there's probably 2 little would-be YouTubers that are never going to start their channels because they can't get Watchmen #1 because Tim is hoarding them.
It's a dog eat dog world out there, man. You know what I mean? You got to find your niche. You know,
that's one way to cut down the competition too.
Yeah, but
I've seen more people collect Night Nurse than I have seen.
Right, because Night Nurse isn't a graphic novel. Those are 4 individual issues, and you want them. If you want Watchmen, you usually want it to read. So you want the trade paperback because it has everything. You don't really care about the individual comics. So the #1 is, for all intents and purposes, a worthless artifact. Maybe it would be nice to, but it's not necessary for you to have it. Unlike Hulk 181, because how do you get Wolverine's first appearance? You get Hulk 181.
Well, they weren't collecting Night Nurse because they wanted to read it. They were collecting Night Nurse because she was going to be a character in a TV show.
Yes, that's right.
I had a complete set of Night Nurse in my old collection.
Old collection back in the
yeah. But you know, Paula made a great point about I think those 2 titles appeal more to readers.
Yeah,
because I had at my peak I had 55,000 comic books. I did not have Sandman. I had Watchmen, but
everybody had Watchmen at a certain age.
Yeah, well, that whole pocket of the Vertigo universe just didn't really have the same appeal to me that the capes and the other genres had. So I think that has a lot to do with it. And like I said, it's hard to find. Okay, if you go to a store and you want to buy Sandman, you want to start reading Sandman, you're not going to find #1 because you say nobody's looking for it. But the people out there that hoard every #1 they can get their hand. That's not a shot at you, Aller, because they come in. Case in point, I had a Sentry #1 for $100 at my store, sold it in a blink. I told the lady that was buying it, I said, I've got a #2 here for $3. Oh, I don't want that. Could not have cared less.
Wow.
And so I said, there's a bunch of people out there that probably have Sandman #1. So if you want to read it, you're going to get the trade. If you can't get #1, why get 2 through? If you happen to stumble across it later, maybe. But for the time being, you can get that first trade and just go straight through.
Yeah, like I really think that trades have a lot to though, but only for those two. But like those two series,
Century is a comic that I wanted to read, so I waited for the trade.
Right. But I'm just saying, I understand people doing it, but there's like tons. We all see them on YouTube. There's tons and tons of chasing the hot issue guys out there.
Well, a
and
lot of it is
Watchmen were never the hot issue for some reason.
See, that's the thing. There's a part of collecting. I'm trying to be tactful here because it can come out very negative, and I don't mean it that way. I'm not even trying to save face there, right? But part of the spec thing is that there's a lot of people that go to those spec channels to know what to collect. I don't know if it's an age thing or what's going on. And there is a greed thing. And when the market drops out, and with the economy the way it is, and people not having the extra spending money anymore and stuff like that, a lot of stuff they've been getting and reacting to is going to bottom out if it hasn't already started. Okay. So you got a lot of people who aren't knowledgeable to begin with. They go to these channels to see what is hot, what they should go after, and that's when they hit eBay. It's real easy to, I don't know how honest a lot of these spec people are, but we used to have people on YouTube who did a lot of the speculation, and then you would find out they were the ones on eBay, flooding eBay with the book they just showed. Now, I'm not going to sit here and that's why I'm trying not to be negative, because back in the day, we did that with Commandy. We did that with Commandy. Everybody went out and got a Commandy #1, and for years. So you
hear about the kayfabe effect too, where when those guys do a video on a book, all of a sudden the price goes up because so many people start looking for it.
I'm not sure if that's real, if it's marketing. Although I imagine that there are a few people on YouTube who actually do that. They buy but it's probably the speculators, not the people who want to own the actual comic.
Yeah, and don't forget, there's also a key finder app you can download.
Oh yeah,
that's it. Yeah, I don't get that. I've seen. About a year ago, that was real big in the store. It's kind of died off to a degree, but yeah, and it's hurting everybody. Because like I said, they just put holes in so many runs, and I think it discourages collectors.
Yes,
I just define it as collectors need something to collect. That's what happens. Is that the people have this We all have this collecting instinct. This, by the way. Here's another. The only time I ever get bad comments on my channel is when people always say they're out hunting comic books. And I'm like, it's more like gathering than hunting when it comes to comics.
Jared, we have had this conversation.
Holy cow, what's
going to happen? You know what's going to happen. You're just showing off now.
People you never heard from are leaving horrible comments and but it's like, that's kind of what it is. You collectors need something to collect. They have that gathering instinct, and then they don't know what to collect, so they go to the key issue app and just follow that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a different guide. It's a different era of. I don't know if it's a tool yet or not, but the greed part of it, I don't think is very good. I think that greed stuff, I mean, you've read the EC comic books, you do something a little bit immoral, then at the end of the book, you get yours. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that greed part, speculation and getting keys are always been part of collecting. You guys agree? I mean, really?
Oh, yeah. Nothing new there.
Yeah. But you reach a point where like in the 90s and stuff like that was when I saw it big. I don't know about the rest of you guys and stuff, but that greed hits and then the bubble pops and you spend a lot of money on nothing. You know what I mean? It's what ends up happening.
But I think another like the keys when we first started. I mean, when I found a comic shop for the first time in early '82, Spider-Man #1 was a key. It cost me $70 whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like, and also at the time, everybody was up in arms because Reggie Jackson signed for $3 million for 5 years.
Right.
Now the backup infielder makes 3 times that for 1. And the comic books have kind of the only thing that's actually risen faster than sports salaries.
Mm-hmm. Oh my God.
Oh yeah, look, that just reminds me too. I keep getting ads in my social media that the Overstreet Guide is now online.
Yeah.
Well,
So I guess
there
they've got a
better be
website.
people there updating it daily because it's a
Yeah.
dinosaur for anybody that doesn't just like to look at the covers. Because I haven't used it in over a year.
To me, I would buy a copy of Overstreet every few years as a history book.
Mm-hmm.
I got a whole shelf over here. I love those things.
Oh, they're great, but as far as like determining the value of something, it's useless.
And kind of getting back over there to the Watchmen Sandman stuff about the number ones and stuff like that. There's people who just want their superhero stories. You know what I mean? Like it's sequential. It's bad guy, good guy, and then you get to Watchmen, and you got to put a little bit more effort into reading it. You know, in patience. And then with Sandman, quite sophisticated. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it's a matter of taste. I think some people may just not want those books because they may have dabbled in it or heard about it, or maybe they're sick of hearing about it. And then I've also had people talk about both of those books like it's from the 80s. Like since it's from the 80s, they just think it's kind of old. You know what I mean? Like they read Watchmen and they feel like it's set in 1985, so they feel like they're on an alien world when they're reading it. Yet I loved reading books that took place in the 50s and 60s, you know, when I was growing up. Obviously, that's when it happened. You know, I love anything from World War II. So I think it's a matter of taste also. You know?
No, it was funny when I was thinking, Watchmen, one of the most undervalued books of the 80s. Then I said to myself, well, what are the valued books of the 80s? I was like, I didn't really know. I was like,
Well, since Gabriel's he's just all over this. It's the first time viewer. The Spawn undervalued. I'm going to have to go on a limb here and say that I think it's overvalued. There was 1 million of them made.
Yeah,
I don't understand how this book has popped up between $20 and $30. I've got like 4 or 5 of them. The one I bought, the one I found in dollar boxes where it's signed by Todd McFarlane, and then behind it was the one that the real, what was the guy's name? Anyway, the guy that he based the character on, his roommate that he named Spawn after, he signed it also. I mean, I found those for years.
I think if you're looking for Spawn number 1 now, you're one of those people who wants a high grade 9.8 Spawn number 1. I don't know if 7.0 Spawn number 1s anybody wants.
Well, there's Todd McFarlane being a fan friendly creator. He's expanding his readership slowly but surely again.
He expanded it fastly again.
Well, I guess I'm thinking in terms of back the old days, and yeah, I guess for today it is. But you've got
after 300 sales went up.
Yeah, when new kids are discovering Spawn, that's actually a first issue that they can afford. Because if you look down into the 100s, you ain't affording those. I mean, there's probably 25 issues of Spawn that are triple figures.
Yep.
Some as high as 500. But you can get that number 1. Hell, you can get the first 20 issues of that book, reasonably.
Yeah.
And it's enough, since they're so popular, you can get a little bit more for that first issue. When it's more of a because I'm sure there's a lot of people that have multiple copies too.
Right.
I mean, they're easy to find, but
I wonder how many copies are out of circulation too, in terms of people who bought Spawn number 1 in the 90s and then stopped collecting comics, and who knows what happened to them. I wonder what percentage of the print run that happened to. Like I have this this hypothesis too with New Mutants, what is that, 87 and 98, which there were a lot of copies of also, not nearly as many as Spawn, but there were a lot of copies of those 2 issues.
You're talking about first appearance of Cable, right?
The first appearance of Cable, first appearance of Deadpool, which have shot up in price. They're some of the most valuable books of the 90s now, even though there's plenty of copies out there, allegedly. But I think that there was a certain percentage of comic book, because I saw this in the early 2000s a lot. There was a certain percentage of comic book fans who, like the dollar bin guys who we all know today, would go through dollar bins and buy comics and speculate or whatever. And I think there was a bunch of like dollar bin guys who would buy those 2 issues for $1 every time they saw them, just because they were the first appearance of, and it was almost like they couldn't even help themselves. It was like, they weren't necessarily buying them because they were going to be real valuable one day. They were just buying them because they were going through dollar bins and, oh, here's the most valuable comic in the dollar bin now, or potentially. And I think a lot of those issues ended up in those collections. I think there's people out there with multiple copies, like 10 or 12 copies of those 2 issues tucked away in some collection somewhere. They might not be collecting anymore. So I think that like the number of those is down from what it could be.
I went out for a second. You're still talking about those New Mutant books, right?
Yeah. Like I just think they're like I think those books in particular, like books that are valuable now from the 90s that were never thought of to ever be valuable. I think people hoarded those books in like the early 2000s for no reason other than they were in the dollar bins.
Well, I mean, you guys jump in there and stuff, but in the early 90s and stuff, people were hoarding books left and right. I mean,
there's that.
That's what, right? But the thing about the New Mutants and Rob Liefeld is when Rob Liefeld hit with that New Mutants, my brother was 4 years older than me. And it was those guys behind me in his age that were like loving that stuff. I'm looking at this stuff. I'd already seen him on Hawk and Dove in a miniseries. I never would have imagined he would have been like Nirvana for them in comics. Yeah. And then to me, it wasn't Deadpool that should be the big book. To me, Cable was the book that opened up the 90s. Like he was that blasting cap that brought books into the 90s just organically with Cable. But Louise Simonson was writing that book, and I feel like she was the one that really directed that stuff, like made it readable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there was like actual love for those books, and then then Cable like, got hot. Deadpool didn't get hot for years,
If the print run of like that first Cable was like, I don't know, 250,000. I wonder how many are out there in circulation.
I've often wondered, similar to the death of Superman. I remember getting that, and when I picked up my little copy that had the ridiculous death patch armband, whatever that thing was, the lady behind the counter said, "What? You're only getting one?" And I said, "Yeah, I just want the one." She was incredulous. Like everybody else is getting 4 or 5, 6 copies.
I was actually
they got the stack behind her, and like, okay, I just want one. I want to read the dumb thing, and that's it. Go ahead, Cal.
Nice. I was actually working at a comic book shop there, Graphic Man, when that came out, and it blew my mind because across the street was a hospital, and we had a line going out the door, and it was lawyers and doctors. You could see them walking across the road coming at us. With they still had their stethoscopes,
Did it trouble you that people that were coming across the street to get something that there were going to be millions of available as an investment? You trouble that they're the people that could have kept you out of jail or out of the morgue?
Yeah.
I was shaking my head like this is not. I knew he wasn't going to stay dead. I just didn't know their plan. Does that make sense? Like maybe they're going to bring him back on an anniversary or something, 1998. I mean, you didn't know. But I also knew that book won't be worth anything because there's millions of them.
And these smart people were thinking it would be.
Yeah.
And I thought this villain that they've got to kill him, I thought if you're going to kill him, why not make it Lex Luthor with the parasite and so but I'm too old school, I guess. But
in whatever happened to Man of Tomorrow, all of the Superman villains tried to kill him and they all failed. So it needed to be somebody he had never fought before.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
I'm reading the book saying throw him into space. Fly up in the air, hit him with your heat vision. I mean, Doomsday took me out of it. I hated the design. I thought it was dumb. And I'm like, man, this could have been good. But I was impressed with the way they told the story where the panels got bigger and bigger until it was all splash pages. I thought that was cool.
And I think at the time, Lex was a redheaded clone of himself playing his son.
with
Yeah,
a beard and a mullet dating Supergirl. I don't know if that. Yeah,
and pretending to be Australian. That was the worst.
That just reminded me. I think it's on Netflix. There was a show called like Marvel versus DC, which was just a little documentary. I think there was like 6 episodes, like 20-minute shows. But one of them was on the death of Superman. And they were actually interviewed. I think Louise Simonson was on it and a few other people. I can't remember who it was. And they were talking about coming up to the death of Superman. That was kind of it. Where I think the story went, see if I'm remembering this right. They were going to have Superman get married, but then they were told by Warner Brothers they couldn't because of the TV show or something.
Yeah.
So
and then they had to hurt. Yeah.
There was somebody, I forget, it was Jerry Ordway or someone who every meeting would suggest, why don't we just kill him? Like every Superman meeting they had for years and years, he would always suggest, well, why don't we just kill him? So this time he suggested, oh, why don't we just kill him? And they all went,
Was it Jerry Ordway or Dan Jurgens?
It may have been Dan Jurgens. I can't remember.
Yeah, I've got it here. I've actually got what you're talking about on DVD here. They released it on DVD. Yeah.
Maybe it was Dan Jurgens. It was one of those Superman guys. But it was just like that. They kind of killed him out of spite to Warner Brothers, who wouldn't let him marry him or something.
It was that one time nobody laughed. But what was so bad is that at the wedding of Superman, I can't believe we're talking Superman of the 90s here, but they had a whole
I didn't even read.
Yeah, they had a whole storyline going where they finally got away from it. And then they were told they're getting married on Lois and Clark. You got to marry him. Hurry up. And they had to do it like that, in the books.
Well, I just thought of something. I usually consider that that James Robinson's the Golden Age ends is the turning point between the deconstructionist and reconstructionist era. But no, I think the death of Superman kind of marks that point because he's killed by basically a bunch of muscles with no brain, which is the epitome of the deconstructionist era, even though image was still not a thing. But when you think about, okay, we just killed Superman. Do you miss him now? The symbol of comics and all that is good. Do you miss him now? And the audience said yes. I think we were finally ready to have heroic stories again, and seeing Superman died kind of led to it.
I will say, you say what you want about that. Superman in that era, from Man of Steel, Byrne, not Bendis, through the late '90s, I thought was must reading for me. I mean, I'm unabashedly a superhero first fan, and no offense to Gratu, who preferred the Silver Age Superman years before it started getting undone. And Death Superman I thought was a really good story, even if the villain was kind of should never have been used again, but because each subsequent appearance cheapened it.
I'm unapologetically a Superman fan. I got Superboy, Superman, my favorite areas.
Oh, same here.
So if I down a story, it's because I can bring up about 100 more. You know what I mean? Like that are I thought are better.
Well, I love that stuff, but it was nice to get stories that didn't. Where Silver Age Superman was kind of like a CBS procedural. At the end of the episode, everything was tied up in a nice, neat little bow, and then never referenced again.
Right.
With very few exceptions. And I liked especially the Triangle era.
I always wanted to see the Kryptonian Thought Beast finally take somebody out when he charged them. I was wanting to see some Kryptonian creatures take people out of the Crystal Forest.
He wants Superman to turn mean.
I'm gonna probably get kicked off of this stream for this, but I've never been a fan of Kryptonian lore.
That's okay, man. It's not for everybody. It's all right.
I mean, a little goes a long way with me.
Oh man. Well, not switching gears or anything, but Graphic Man has been silent, and he actually has a topic. You guys ready to switch to a little pulp?
Well, I don't know if you call it pulp, I guess, but since Howler brought up some Korak, the DC stuff, I thought I would let him know about these good hardback books that reproduce the Russ Manning artwork of the Gold Key era.
Who's publishing them?
Dark Horse.
Okay.
It was a few years ago. But the Russ Manning artwork is probably the better of the artwork of that day for Gold Key. And I just think you ought to give that a shot. I don't know if you have many of the Gold Key, but I have the full set, and I couldn't help but get these two as well. So
I'm just glad they're published again. I've got sporadic issues and stuff, and sporadic issues of the DC stuff. But yeah, I'll definitely check those out.
They do a great job, and for the people that are watching, when they get to the cover, they don't print the title, the trade dress, so you won't see the Gold Key logo at the top. You won't see the title. You'll just see the painted artwork. So,
that's awesome.
But
as we were discussing before the show, the printing on them is good. They weren't scanned in from old comics and printed.
Very crystal clear.
Edgar Rice Burroughs' company there obviously archived all this stuff in the 60s.
And Russ Manning is great. He doesn't get, this is not John Byrne or Steranko, but Russ Manning quality would have been really good for a newspaper strip.
It wasn't a newspaper strip. We've had collections of his Sunday strip here in Portugal.
Yeah, I just think, and what a great little cover there, where they've taken a.
So, what years was Korak at Gold Key?
60s.
60s, and then it went to DC in the 70s.
Mm-hmm. And they kept the numbering. I think Howler thought that hurt DC, but so there's like issue 46. That would be like the first issue DC's printing. So the first 45 are Gold Key. And they did the same thing with Tarzan. Of course, Tarzan's getting its start with Dell, then Gold Key, then DC. And so DC would keep the numbering, I believe, into the 200s. Don't quote me on that. I don't have it with me. But
DC never changed the numbers. I mean, they did that with Black Hawk.
Right.
Some of the funny animal books they acquired over the years.
Of course, there's a reason. There's a reason why they didn't do that, because you would have to re-register a new title at the post office, and that thing was not cheap. And for the people buying the comics, they wouldn't care at all in the newsstand.
Now, after DC, Marvel gets Tarzan. They did not bother to pick up Korak. Marvel changed the title Tarzan, Lord of the Apes, and then you get a #1 issue. Right. Ran for, I think, 29 issues. And if you're a big Korak fan like me, Korak does make an appearance in the Marvel issues. At one point, he's driving a Jeep or doing something silly like that.
Now, just to jump in there with the Marvel DC thing,
right
I always recommend the Joe Kubert stuff. I kept the first annual and the first issue of the Marvel stuff. I think DC did a much better job. I love Tarzan, and I had to get rid of those Marvel books. They actually had a cover where Tarzan played King Kong on top of a building with a little plane around him. And I'm like, and John Buscema drew a little bit of it, and he pulled some Frank Frazetta in there, I think, but I digress.
Yeah. But Marvel did adapt Edgar Rice Burroughs stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You may be a little too hard on it, I guess. I thought Marvel did a pretty good job.
Okay.
Maybe look at it down the road, a few years. Maybe,
Oh, it's cool, man. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Because people forget that the Marvel got the rights to Tarzan and John Carter at the same time, which is why they both had a comic and they both lasted for the same time. And on both occasions, they adapted the original stories.
And the art on those early John Carters.
Back when the movie came out, the John Carter movie, I reread all those John Carters in the omnibus, and I really enjoyed them, much more than I enjoyed them as a kid.
The Tarzan Annual 1 for Marvel is a little difficult to read because it takes you back when Tarzan is kind of young and he still hasn't got everything figured out in his mind. And he's looking at this female ape and he hasn't figured out what should be desirable, let's just say. And she chooses this male ape, and it confuses Tarzan of why he wasn't, chosen. So once you get past that story, it turns out to be okay. But it's a little weird. Like, Marvel, what are you doing? Maybe we shouldn't go down this.
That is an actual Edgar Rice Burroughs story. He did a book of short stories, and that one is in there. And I guess, I have it. I have another, a more recent adaptation, which is included in the Tarzan Carson collected edition from Dark Horse, and I think it's a story that resonates with a lot of classic Tarzan readers, because it's probably Tarzan at the most vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable that he ever was. He's a quick adapter to new situations, when he discovers regular people, and Paul Darno teaches him how to be a human, and he adapts quickly. And seeing him just going into puberty, I guess that's when he was, even though he didn't know how to be a human, that's the most raw humanity that he had, and that people would resonate with that.
I was just wondering, how will this go over with the 7-year-olds that are picking this up and going through it, But, whatever.
I think what I would guess is that if they reread those books like 15, 20 years later, they're going to be like, oh my God. They oh no, what was I reading my whole life?
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I think I read that when I was, what year did that come out? That
77?
Something like that, yeah.
Well, I probably read that when I was 11. I remember I remember reading a Tarzan and being very confused about why he liked an ape.
Yeah.
That's all I remember. That's all I have a memory of.
Yeah.
So I'll have to go check. It might still be on my shelf. I haven't looked at my Tarzan.
Well, I think it's annual one. I think it's annual one.
Right?
That story is even mentioned in Planetary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'll go ahead and just throw this out there and back up because I'm not going to go into it. But I used to try to warn people, and I was telling you guys, I haven't read as much Tarzan as I thought. So as a guy who was like reading the serials and all that stuff, there's parts in Tarzan where he is brutal. Like we're talking when some tribe messes with the apes and kills some of them. He gets vines, makes nooses, and he's going around and he's making them disappear. That's why they started calling him the Ghost. And then he would take their skulls and in the middle of the night pile them up in a little pyramid and start doing his yelling and freak them all out. There's some brutal stuff. I used to think that was the most brutal stuff until I read some of this Philip Jose Farmer, A Feast Unknown. No, that's fine. I'm like, okay. And now I digress. Yeah.
And all this talk about Gold Key and Dell reminds me of Harvey. And Sid Jacobson died this week. Do you guys know who he is?
Who did?
Sid Jacobson.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
He was an editor at Harvey Comics for about 30 years. And then he edited the Star Comics line at Marvel. And I knew him in the very early 90s. He was still at Marvel when I first started there. Really nice guy, but one of these guys who had a long career in comics who nobody knows who he is. So, and he was like 90, I think. He was not young when he died. And he also he wrote popular songs in like the 50s and 60s. Like he's actually got you can go and look up his songwriting credits that, pop musicians sang his songs. And then like in the early 2000s, he and Ernie Colon did a bunch of government report comics. Like I remember, I think the first one they did was the 9/11 report, which they took and turned into a comic book. You can find them on Amazon. I just thought I'd mention that Sid Jacobson died this week, a longtime comic book editor.
Man, I know the name, and that's just but I have no idea where I read across it, man. So that's sad.
Yeah, well, you'd know his name from Star Comics,
You know what? I got Planetary right here. No, I'm
Hey, we can move on. I just wanted to show. I know Eric and Apollo have seen this, but I made this because, it's the novel Tarzan and the Ant-Man.
Uh-huh.
And it's like 1920. But
you made your own dust jacket for it?
Yeah, I found a graphic of a magazine where. So I just said, hey, I might as well make my own little dust cover. So
that just reminded me. Do you guys know who Earl Grey, the YouTuber, is? I think he does YouTube videos in English, but I think he's German.
Yeah.
He's been making his own boxes for box sets.
Mm-hmm.
So
the slip cases.
Slip cases, yeah, they're pretty cool. He gets I think it's an 1/8-inch wood, and he makes boxes out of them. Like he's got all his Love and Rockets individual issues in a box. Then he pastes color printouts of whatever stuff he got. I was like, oh, they look real nice. Like what a crazy idea, making your own boxes for boxes.
See, that's what comics used to do. They used to inspire you to be creative. Just saying. Just saying. And I'm sorry, guys. I just realized I haven't hosted a show in so long. I just remember we could have went full screen on some of this stuff. Sorry. But real quick, I pulled these off the shelf. Not only is this a John Carter tale, right? But it's a Richard Corbin cover.
Yeah, you can full screen yourself too there.
Well, he's keeping the theme alive of Stan Small.
Yeah. Don't worry, I've got my reading glasses.
How do I do it? Hold on. I can't remember how to do this. Hold on. I got it.
Little dots in the top of your corner of whatever picture.
Solo layout. Gotcha. Okay. There we go.
Yeah, Richard, too big. Too much
Richard Corbin cover. That's the only reason I keep this book. And then I don't know who did the cover to this one, but I always forget that Edgar Rice Burroughs also did The Land That Time Forgot. That there's a fantastic 70s movie, which is probably why this is reprinted here. There was a Land That Time Forgot, then there was one that came after that again, returned. I don't know what it was, but they were like very 70s B movie types, if I remember from when I was a kid. Man, that's really uncomfortable, man.
Well, it's a great thing because this is 1920, and historically, the Wright brothers, 1903, in just about 15 years or so, he's already flying airplanes. A lot of people were quick on the uptake. What I would still consider, you'd need a big learning curve. And I mean, how many people had an airplane? They're only so many years old. So.
Mm-hmm. That reminds me. Have you guys ever? Read the early Gasoline Alleys?
Yeah. Skeezix and
Walton Skeezix that were reprinted as it was amazing. I had never read those before they started printing the Walton Skeezix books, and I fell in love with it after I read them. But it was amazing to me, in 1920, 21, 22, if you had a car, you were a hobbyist.
Yeah.
You had to take care of that. You had to do your own mechanical stuff. I imagine I don't know if airplanes were the same like in 1920, where if you owned an airplane, you took care of it yourself. You were an airplane hobbyist. It was like a commitment rather than a job. But I don't know how fast airlines became commercialized, but.
Yeah, but this is also like when you could have saved up for a year and got one for like $40,
And according to
yards for like 5 pennies at a time,
According to Gasoline Alley, flat tires were just a way of life if you had a car.
Well, I wonder if back then everybody was publishing what we would consider popular mechanics, popular science.
Right.
If everybody was publishing the schematics, this is what this guy in France is doing, this is what this guy over here is doing. Yeah. And they were all probably just sharing their ideas I don't know. Maybe they're all building their own.
Yeah, well, that's where the name Gasoline Alley comes from. Because if you had a car, they had in the whatever little town, whatever little neighborhood they had, there was an alley with a bunch of garages in it, and that's where you kept your car. So the original comic strip was the guys hanging out in the alley talking to each other before it became a family comic. But I was like, yeah, that's that. It's like, you had to trade tips with your neighbor who also had a car in order to keep yours running.
The first time that somebody did a trip on a car to prove that it could be useful was in 1888. It was Carl Benz's wife, and she had to stop regularly at the town's chemist to make sure that they had benzene, because since nobody had done a car trip before, there were no places to refill, and she needs to know that there would need to be places where you could refill your gas tank.
I learned about that on there's a Twitter guy called Fake History Hunter, who he points out when people are always posting memes and stuff or whatever with historical stuff on it that is just completely wrong. And one of them was that someone posted a picture of that woman and her two assistants, which wasn't that woman and her two assistants. It was a recreation of a woman and her two assistants from 1983 or something like that. So that's when I learned all about that story of the wife of the Mercedes-Benz manufacturer who
Mercedes put out did a video dramatization about five or 6 years ago.
Yeah. I wonder if I can make all kinds of fake pictures
and fool people.
Yeah.
Yeah. In matter of fact, in Frank King, the cartoonist on Gasoline Alley, was a car enthusiast too. And they actually have pictures of it in the Walton Skizik's book. Like in 1921 or 1922, somewhere around there, he took his family on a car excursion across the United States. There weren't a lot of roads then for cars, but he did it, and he had his characters do it in the book, like the next year. So it was like, he was one of those early car guys. Not quite as early as 1883.
I tell you what, the stack of books that came into the house at some point when I was a kid, it was Gasoline Alley with Alley Oop, and I would kill to have those Alley Oop books back again.
Yeah, me too.
I've never read Alley Oop. That's one I missed.
Oh, you need to. He goes back in time, and he goes forward in time, and it's some good stuff. Really good stuff.
It was enchanting, I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
it was very enchanting. Loved it.
It was about maybe 50. It must still about 15 years ago, I think it was. Like the mid-aughts. We started like entering sort of a golden age of comic strip reprints. That's when the Gasoline Alley stuff came out. They started reprinting like everything. What did I get? I got the Buck Rogers Sundays, which doesn't have Buck Rogers in them, but it was very good, and a few other things I remember getting. And I think it's still going. There's still plenty of comic strips you can get in oversized hardcover form, but I just ran out of room.
Well, I'm very grateful to the 1980s Blackthorn because they kept doing all the Dick Tracy stuff.
Right. That's another one that got reprinted a lot starting in the 2000s.
I think Jonathan's either joking or he missed the beginning of the show.
Only uber nerds even mention Watchmen, even though it's fairly popular.
Oh man, people are asking where I live. I can't do that, guys. Sorry. The internet's a dangerous place.
He lives in Los Angeles, California. Can't you tell?
Ask me off. No, I don't even know where.
I'm in Virginia. I'll tell you that. So we'll give the state. I'm in.
He actually lives in Monte Carlo. He only pretends to be a redneck. He's actually international man of mystery.
I was gonna say he lives in the wall of a house with the little cutout there that you run through.
Yeah, me and the cats, man.
That's right.
All right, what do we got here?
Blackthorn,
Modesty Blast and XI. I know
Blaze.
the name Modesty Blast, but I
Modesty
don't.
Blaze.
Thank you.
Famous English comic strip character. I think she was in books too, right? She was a secret agent.
Yeah.
My friend Bunch is a huge fan of Modesty Blaze, but I've never gotten into it.
And according to Wold Newtonians, Modesty Blaze is the daughter of Tarzan and La.
Ah.
Nice.
Yeah, when you get to that next comment by Horror Mike, he also, Blackthorn did Planet Comics a little bit, but
I think I have a collection of covers from Planet Comics.
I have that. I know what you're talking about.
What I actually do sometimes is I collect covers digitally.
Mm-hmm.
So I just like sometimes online you can find scans of books. I just put the covers all into one file. And like if I want to look at them, I just look at them on my iPad. I think I did one of Planet Comics. I'll have to look. I haven't seen it in a while. But I have some nice covers on that one.
Paolo is a construct.
I am an AI construct.
Yes.
He knows too much.
And he will be on television soon.
I'm going to be on television tomorrow.
Ah.
Yes.
Nothing to do with comics.
No, it's cars.
He's going to be limited on Gasoline Alley, but
no, it's electric car racing. No gasoline there.
I've never been able to get into Prince Valiant. I've tried on multiple occasions, but if I were to read it, I would do it just that way, just a few pages a day. Especially a lot of those old-fashioned comic strips were not meant to be read.
I tell you what, as a little youngster, I liked Prince Valiant, the artwork, but I wanted a word balloon.
Yeah.
And it was always the text underneath. Maybe now I'm older, I could probably handle it, but I just liked word balloons.
I read it because it was in the Sunday comics, and I was a completist. Back then, I would read every strip. It'd be a couple years later before I got tired of reading the crappy ones. And I got into the art, so by fault, I was keeping up with it, but it never wowed me. I like the art. Years later, at a comic book convention around here called RobCon, and there's going to be another one in a couple months. It's been going on. It's a local comic book convention. He had gotten the guy in, and all I saw on the sign was the guy worked on Prince Valiant. I thought he took over the strip. Nobody was talking to him, so I go up, and I'm like, I love your work, because I felt bad. Turns out he just colored it. That's all.
No.
Yeah, I like colors.
Yeah,
I like colors. That's what it felt like exactly. Yeah.
So, Tim, I don't know if you can still get this, but this is the movie that was made of Modesty Blaze in the 1966 or 7.
Oh, nice logo.
That is awesome.
Yeah, the company that put this out did these in the two Flint movies. And Fathom from Raquel Welch. They all came out around the same time.
Oh, okay. My God. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, that's right up my alley. Then I would definitely check that out.
Who published them?
Well, it says 20th Century Fox here, but I think they came out in the late 90s, early 2000s. But so it's good stuff.
Nice. That is awesome. I'll definitely check it out. I wonder if that's on Tubi. I've got a few things I can try to find it.
What channel will Paolo be on?
Eurosport 2 and be at 2 p.m. Portuguese time.
ESPN 8, the Ocho.
And now that we have, Breen's been on the channel before, but he has officially christened it now. There we go. He brought the Breen. And I'm not going to lie, it took me 2 shows of the Fossils to figure out what the hell that was.
I think it's sort of like being rickrolled.
No.
You turn on a YouTube channel and there he is.
So I'm sure the first week you just thought, this is really creepy. And then when you found out what it was, okay, it's not as bad.
Yeah.
Although I did ask you to bring something, and you didn't even know what the comic was. I found out that
because I'm not an AI. I don't know everything.
Eric does not know what Street Poet Ray is.
He does not know what Street Poet Ray is. He's not hip. He's not with it. He's not down.
I am closer to
early
hip
'90s
replacement than him.
scene, man.
No, because this guy, this guy that's on the Portuguese show with me and Mind the Comics, is in Singapore now doing some work, and he went to the comic store there, and he picked up something from Marvel that he found very odd. And before he showed it, oh, don't tell me you found Street Poet Ray. It did find Street Poet Ray. Street Poet Ray is unanimous before America Chavez was unanimously considered the worst comic ever put out by Marvel Comics.
Just remember, as Marie Javen said, the same agent that brought Street Poet Ray to Marvel brought Akira. So we wouldn't have one without the other.
They complement each other.
Yeah, I have a friend that's collecting every Marvel comic published, and I mean every one. I'm gonna have to ask him if he's got that. I've asked him that.
That the crazy thing was being an indie guy even back then. Street Poet Ray was an indie book first, published by Blackthorn, I think it was, and I actually picked it up because I was an indie guy in the '80s, as I am now. Some crazy black and white book from Blackthorn. Of course, I'm going to pick it up. Then a few years later, I see Marvel publishing it. And I was just like, what?
And it wasn't even an epic comic. It was just Marvel.
I wish I had it. They gave everyone at Marvel a Street Poet Ray t-shirt. I wish I still had mine. Black t-shirt with a white Street Poet Ray comic strip on it.
So I'm going to do a mic check. For some reason, my computer and StreamYard are saying they don't recognize my mic. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. You did drop out for a minute.
Yeah. Okay, awesome.
And by the way, Street Poet Ray was, I think, an actual street poet in Los Angeles who somehow paired up with an artist who I think was Japanese, a woman. If memory serves, I could be wrong. And they made these comic strips of Street Poet Ray's street poetry. It's classic.
I like how we got this mix and everybody's got a pain here at least. That's awesome. Everybody's. And then we got here. Is it really a YouTube channel without Breen? There it tells me in the chat.
Nope. It is now.
Oh my god.
The stream is now official.
Mm-hmm. You just need to pull out a Gil Kane comic.
Well, I was touting the John Carters, and I saw graphics reaching down. I think he was reaching for the alarm. And he goes, "Oh, wait a minute, this isn't my channel." Damn it.
We're not that fancy on this show. We don't have a budget,
Which begs the question: can you do that on somebody else's channel?
No.
Can you activate the alarm?
No, I sure can't.
I just got an email from my local comic shop. The final order cutoff email. I always like that. My comic shop owner has got a great system. He's a coder. He's actually got a day job like writing code for some credit card company. So he's got a system where every week automatically, not only does it tell me what comics I got coming in for me this week, but he's got a whole list of the comics that are on final order cutoff. And I just click on the link and tell him to order it for me.
That's awesome.
It's always fun to go through. It makes it real easy. Because otherwise I go, oh, I should put that on my list and then completely forget about it.
But I think we just kayfabe affected street poetry.
That's what I'm saying.
There'd be a run.
Yeah, a couple people or somebody has jumped to eBay.
You find their Street Poet Ray.
If there's a ton of Street Poet Ray on eBay, it's probably, if not all of them, pretty much.
I think my Street Poet Ray issues I either got rid of or they got Raiders of the Lost Ark here in my collection. And I don't think I got rid of them. I don't know what. I'd be crazy to have gotten rid of them.
Bring you getting plugged. We plugged Paulo on the Portugal television. So the Geeky Puppet Show will be reading a comic tonight with Breen there as Captain George Stacy. You got a great part.
And don't forget, we've also got Joe Robertson and Harry Osborn to my left, right, whichever way you're looking. From left to right on your YouTube screen.
Sometimes, yeah.
Oh my god!
Now that I'm telling you, those are a blast. I said, yeah, you guys need to do one of those with us someday because they're just tons of fun.
What live reading of the comic?
Yeah, we have our own tropes. We change stuff. We this kid that's in charge of it. He's a early 20s puppeteer, and he's legitimate. I mean, he's talented. He's really, really good, and he does Jameson's voice, and it's hysterical. But when we did a Doom Patrol, he read General Immortus as if he were on the toilet and he just could not get it out. And so I borrowed that. That's how I read George Stacy. and I said we just have our like whenever Harry's on, they'll use his whole name. It's just like if you watch enough of them, you know what's coming before we do it. But it really is a lot of fun.
It's Mystery Science Theater for comic reading.
One way to put it, yeah. And that's where the Mr. Green is ready to monologue comes from.
All right, I've got a question here. Yeah, I've been to Big Lick Comic Con in Roanoke before, and cool. Dressed as the Joker. I was not there in February 2022. Awesome. Okay. Now let's talk about this Mystery Science Theater for comic book reading. I would be down for somebody like turning the pages of a comic and us throwing comments at it for it being so nice.
Did you guys ever see the I forget what it was called. I found it on IMDb one day and I think it was from what I've read about it on IMDb, it was actually early Nickelodeon. But if you remember in like the late 70s, we used to have TV channels, like the local TV channel. All it would be was like a camera on the temperature and barometric pressure and whatever other weather information. That's what it was all day.
You guys were so fancy in the 70s in New York. Listen to you.
It was just, but then at night, all of a sudden, they read Adam Strange and Sugar and Spike comics to us. I guess they switched over to very early, and this was on cable too. Very early Nickelodeon, it says, according to IMDb. But that's the first time I used to be fascinated by it.
That is awesome.
It was like they would just focus the camera on a panel, read it, move it to the next panel, read it. And I think on IMDb it even said Larry Hama did some of the reading on it.
See, I would have killed for that, Jared, but you know what we had to do? We had to call and find out what time the temperature was on a phone. It
was Jared. I remember something similar to that, but it was Adam Strange.
Yeah, Adam Strange and Sugar and Spike were the two.
And it was in the 80s, and it was I only saw it once.
Okay.
And I was too young to remember what channel was that. Where did I see that again?
For me, it was on this weird local, like I said, there was like 12 channels, and one of them was dials. And it was like the whole day until one day they started reading this comic books. And I found it a few years ago on IMDb, and they said, and I think that was actually early Nickelodeon.
I would love to. I mean, I would have killed for that. That would have been so.
Yeah, I was like, I never read, but what was so weird? It was like, this is. You're right. It may have been. It was either the late 70s or early 80s. It's all blurry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Howler, if you called 976, they would tell you a story there too.
But it's weird that they picked like obscure at the time 1960s comics to read, but that's what DC picked, I guess. Like Sugar and Spike. When was the last time Sugar and Spike was published?
Now I'm being dead serious. Man. But if you can think back in time, did they sound stoned? I'm picturing somebody stoned. We got a camera and a stack of comics.
I didn't know what stoned was.
Yeah, okay.
Now, if they'd read Sugar and Spike the way adults heard them, that would have been awesome.
That was like the only time I've ever read. Well, had read to me Sugar and Spike and Adam Strange comics. I've never gotten into either of those.
Now I want to crossover.
Yeah, the Zeta Beam brings Sugar and Spike to Ron.
That's some worlds colliding there. I'll tell you.
Yes, sir.
Oh my gosh!
I don't have to look that up again and find it.
Oh man. All right, man. I hate to do this, but I'm gonna have to wind it up a little bit. I gotta get up early in the morning. Anybody? I mean, we don't have to do it like this second, man. But anybody else got anything they want to inject in there? Any other topics they want to go after?
Let me check my notebook. I wonder if I have anything in there.
Here we go.
There was. I keep forgetting. There was something I put in here like 4 weeks ago. I remember, but
So Jared is ready to monologue.
Yes. Yeah.
I have to see if I actually got to it or not.
It was the best.
So we're not
My
winding this
reading
up.
glasses on my head.
We're not winding this up. There's going to be a monologue about somebody tonight. I can feel
See,
it.
if Venkman were here, he'd be putting up 40 minutes later, and then an eternity later.
I like how Graphic Man has gotten comfortable, man. He's gotten very comfortable. You know,
He knows what's coming.
We should, you know what? Actually, I want to ask you guys something. This is a question that Paolo and Wilson and I have been discussing the last few weeks in Cavern of Chaos.
I'll go with Paolo.
and it's a Stan Lee question. In that, it struck me. You always hear I was talking about how improbable Marvel Comics was. How it's just amazing that they even existed, let alone changed comics in the.
Oh yeah, I commented when you were doing that. Yeah,
right. Yes, and people always say that one of the big reasons was Stan Lee was such a great marketer, and I was like, it struck me. I have no idea what that means. Like, I mean, I know what marketing is. I know Stan Lee didn't have a marketing department. I know Stan Lee wasn't taking out ads everywhere and had an ad campaign going. So it was like I was trying to put myself in the mind of like a 10 to 14-year-old in 1962. What did Stan Lee do to make me buy Marvel Comics?
Especially in the first 2 years when there was no Marvel logo. How would people know that there was a comic that was better than the other ones?
And we were just trying to like put ourselves in that mind and think about I'm like, people say, we all know like once Marvel got some buzz, he was doing all the interviews and everything he could. But where did that buzz come from?
If I were to guess, I would say people are curious by nature. You go to the stand, you see something that's not Superman or Batman or Justice League at the time. You pick it up. Like you open the first issue of Fantastic Four, and the one guy is in love with the other guy's girlfriend and hates him.
But I'm not even talking about like this. I'm not even talking about.
It's like
I'm not even talking about like the stories themselves and the quality.
I got a theory when you're
only
ready.
because
but I was saying, but that probably led to word of mouth.
Right. I'm just, but
and maybe that's how you create a buzz.
But what are they? But like what? But when Stan Lee being a great marketer, what is that? What is? I mean, I can understand someone gets something that's good and says, "Hey, this is good. Check it out." But what exactly do you think Stan Lee's marketing was? Tim, you had something you wanted to say?
I would say
only if anybody else got something to say. I mean, I'll be last, but yeah, I mean,
I just think it's an interesting thought experiment.
It gets your eye because it was Jack Kirby and a little bit of Ditko. I'm not quite sure when Buscema came in there doing covers, but their artwork is what caught your eye because it wasn't crisp, clean, and static like your Kurt Swans and Andersons and all those guys that were doing the crisp artwork.
I understand.
Yeah, wait, but when you got in there and you read what was in there, you had Stan Lee bring us some kind of charm, funneling all that energy. Every picture was in motion. There's nobody just standing there posing, things like that. It was little things like that caught kids like a cartoon, You know what I mean? It
Mm-hmm.
essentially may have come to like bright colors and neat drawings, and then the artist. But then it was Stan that was bringing them back a little bit with the writing every month and talking to the people as time went by, like we're all in this together. He made you feel like you're a part of a club.
I understand that part, but how does it work? Well, so it's kind of like let's just this is what I was saying. I'm a kid in 1962.
Yeah,
standing in front of
Tim. I think Wilson's in the back room.
Oh man, okay. Let me see if I can get my computer to let me see him. I have got. All right, let me figure this out. Wilson, let me get you in there. Well, it's where comics were sold. They were sold where kids could see them.
Right. I was just picturing, and I was thinking, was it as simple as because we were also discussing nothing was branded.
Good evening.
Good evening, Wilson. How are you doing tonight?
When people talk about the Stan Lee touring, that happens in 66, 67, 68,
yeah, that's
69.
much later.
We're talking the important year is 62. Right. Half of the characters show up in 62. And Marvel branding does not appear until May 63. So you have about a year and a half of comics, most of them still not superheroes. But the superheroes are coming little by little, one at a time. And somehow the kids glom onto them. And that's how we're trying to figure out exactly how. And it's not, and I get that Jack Kirby's art, is attractive, but Jack Kirby is not a new proposition in comics. Because we're so focused on the history of comics from a superhero point of view, we forget that the 1950s existed. And Kirby was one of the biggest sellers in the 1950s.
Well, so, I can tell you what my stepdad told me in the story.
Yep.
Okay, I can tell you. I mean, I think I get you now.
Right.
Paula. But what my stepdad more or less said, it was like word of mouth. People would just get them. They'd see their friends with them. They'd be rolled up in their back pocket. They're out riding their bikes. And then they would sit around in like a little clubhouse or a patch of woods, side of the road, or whatever. And they were all actually sit down. Then they started figuring out Marvel books were better than DC. So if you wanted to trade books, they would actually trade back then.
Oh, yeah.
The rule was 2 DC comics for 1 Marvel.
What year do you think that was, though?
And let me think. He was 17 in 1972, so go back from there. So it was dead on mid-60s.
Yeah. Okay.
If I remember, no, 19. He was 20. He was born around 51, 52. Let's just put it that way. I can't really remember.
So he'd be around 10 or 11 in 62.
Going by what I remember, yeah. We'll say he was born anywhere between 1950 and 52. Okay.
Mm-hmm. But like that's how improbable, it was improbable that Stan Lee was working at a company. That he was the last man standing at Marvel. It was improbable that he had Ditko and Kirby, 2 longtime popular veteran artists to work with who could also write. There was like so many improbabilities in Marvel Comics existing that right down to nothing was branded at that time too.
But to tag on to what Eric was saying, not only was there anger and frustration in the group and jealousy, but by issue 2, everybody on the planet in the Marvel world knew who those 4 people were. There were no secret identities.
Mm-hmm. But
by issue 3, the villain is telling everybody, introducing to the crowd, oh, there's Reed Richards and blah, blah, and he's announcing. So the kids were going, hey, this isn't Bruce Wayne. This isn't Clark Kent. Everybody knows who these guys are. That's different. And they would get on their bikes and they would go tell their kids down the street, these are heroes. Everybody knows who they are. By issue 5, Johnny Storm is reading a Hulk magazine. There's your crossover right off the bat. So this is a group of a world of heroes that's going to start playing in each other's backyard. And you've got the counterculture with all the underground comics and all the hippies, and they're all saying, hey, man, did you check out the new latest blah, blah, blah. That's how you got these rock stars that have Silver Surfer on the album covers. And so this was a phenomenon.
I understand.
Organic.
That's another improbable thing that you mentioned. How the hell does a 39-year-old guy know how to talk to hippies and college kids?
Yeah.
Hey guys, I hate to bail, but Englentine just asked me if I would have a quick conversation with him about some stuff for his auction.
Okay.
So thank you for having me on, and as I said, check out the auction tomorrow night, and Graphic, hopefully see you in about an hour if you can.
All right, man. Have a good weekend, brother.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah, and Graphic, but that would mean I understand the content of the book is good but good content isn't always successful. But that's not Stan Lee's marketing. That's Stan Lee, the writer. So I think pondering what they mean when they say Stan Lee's marketing. Maybe Stan Lee's marketing was only real good once it got that buzz.
Stan Lee might be the beneficiary of a lot of this. Was just spreading like wildfire.
Just happening.
He might be getting the credit that
could be. That's what I was trying to figure out, because everyone always says, "Oh, Stan Lee was just such a great marketer. Marvel Comics wouldn't be what it was without Stan Lee's marketing." And
he looks good in the rearview mirror now, but
yeah. I had to make a lot of peace about Stan Lee as I learned more about comics and stuff. But what you're talking about was to me, it was like an organic movement. I had my uncle, I had my stepdad, I had a guy that was friends with with both of them named Buford. I have some of his Aquaman comics where he wrote Buford on his comics where he read them as a kid. It was an organic movement. It was kids on their bicycles telling each other about these books. That's how the buzz was created, at the same time across all these little towns and stuff,
That's how the story was told to me, because my stepdad, my father, Wilson Ramos Sr., didn't read comic books. He was in Puerto Rico at the time that would be going on. My stepfather, now he lived in New Rochelle, and he told me when they were kids, someone would buy a comic book, and then it would be shared with every kid in the neighborhood. Right. And I've heard two comic book stories from around that time period. One was from my stepdad, and then the other one was from my former boss at Marvel, Gary Guzzo. And he told me about when he was buying comic books during that time period, and it was just something so different in the stands that he gravitated to it just by the sheer look of it.
Wow.
Now, back then, comics were not competing with really much of anything else. Television was fairly new, and if you could afford a television, it was going to be in black and white. So what other forms of entertainment was out there for it to compete with, and price-wise? So I think that if you're buying DC books, and then something new pops up, you might gravitate towards it as something new. And like I said, my stepdad said, someone would buy a few books, and then everyone would be trading the books from each other. So he said he's almost positive he read Amazing Fantasy 15. It had to go through the town because he knows who Spider-Man is, and he stopped. He didn't collect, but he recalls reading the books, and he recalls reading comics all over the place, whether it was the superhero stuff. His favorite character was Popeye, so there were certain books here and there that he knew characters. But he may not have recognized who they were particular. And that's just a small slice. And like I said, with Gary, he said it was just such a different thing. It was the art style was different. The storytelling was different from DC. And it was something new because if you were buying books for a while and something that new came up, and the closest thing I could say we had was maybe Image. Where it's like, here's something brand new that just by it existing, we all knew about it. It hit the news and stuff like that. So I'm wondering if that's there as well. Plus, again, as Jared mentioned, there is no reason why any of it should have succeeded, but it did. But we also concentrating on what succeeded, because there were plenty of publishers that came out and disappeared. Once superhero books got popular again, everyone had superhero books. the Golden Age kind of showed us that with the creation of Superman. Everybody had a bunch of books, and then they became orphan characters that would eventually show up again.
I will say it's amazing they accomplished it with just 8 little slots on the newsstand, because that's all they were allowed.
Mhm.
That's amazing.
I think our conclusion might be that Stan Lee's marketing in the beginning didn't have a lot to do with it. It was mostly Stan Lee writing and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. So the content, and then Stan Lee's marketing may not have kicked in for a while.
I don't know why I feel so validated. You came to that conclusion yourself, but I'm sitting here like, for years. You know, I'm like, I had to make a lot of peace with Stan Lee. I really did. You know,
Yeah.
You got to remember, there are no truths, only stories.
Yeah.
That's what it comes out to.
Or Mike is trying to draw a comparison between 50s Marvel and 60s Marvel. Stan Lee did nothing at Marvel except be a traffic cop. That thing was actually fairly easy. Martin Goodman would flood the newsstands. The comics that sold well, he would keep. The ones that did not, he would cancel. And the rest, 5-page story, 4-page story, 5-page story, 4-page story, 5-page story, and everything. It was an assembly line. Writer brought in script. Artist came in looking for work. Here's a script. Bring it back in 5 days.
There's your
Journey into mystery. There's one of them.
The thing that most of those comics are pretty interchangeable. That Marvel put out in the 50s, they're pretty interchangeable. There's nothing interesting about him. Stan Lee, what Stan Lee took for himself was what he thought was the probable bestsellers, which was the teen humor books. He wrote My Girl Pearl, which was based on a TV show, and he wrote Millie the Model.
Yeah.
And he would recycle jokes a lot.
Yeah, so I'd say then that what year do you think the Stan Lee marketing kicked in with around 63? With they've already had some success. They start branding Marvel.
If Stan Lee had an idea that nobody had before, it was the soapbox. It was the bullpen bulletin.
Yeah.
And that in itself was a great marketing ploy, because
there was some of that in EC Comics.
And then they made that little record album where you got to hear their voices and stuff like that.
What year did they make what year was the Merry Marvel Marching Society? 65? I don't know why.
About that time, yeah. Because as soon as it starts, so the bullpen bulletin comes out at the same time as the Marvel logo. Then you have bullpen bulletins in Amazing Spider-Man #2, and Fantastic Four #14.
1964 is when it was founded.
The Merry Marvel Marching Society?
Yes, according to Wikipedia. Founded in 1964, the founders were Stan Lee and Martin Goodman.
Right, and
Mike loves the Marvel pre-code,
and I get it, Mike, and I agree, because I'm a big fan of Joe Mannielli. I don't think Colin was still Colin then. Just like John Buscema was not John Buscema yet, although you could see the things that they eventually became. Stuff that Don Heck was already doing was very, very good. Especially I believe he did the War Comics. Don Heck did a couple of westerns.
Yeah.
But the thing is,
look at that.
When we look back, it's easy for us to spot those artists and see this is very good. But in terms of marketing, that the way Marvel operated with the flooding of the newsstands, there was no way for anything that they put out to stand out. So you could not buy Atlas. You would not think of Atlas as the brand that you wanted to follow.
Oh, now that you mention that, we're back to Graphic Man's 8 comics. So they couldn't flood the newsstand.
No.
In the 60s. Maybe that's another fluke thing. that had, since Martin Goodman could not do his usual thing of flooding the newsstands with whatever trend was out.
Yeah, you could.
They actually decide, and like I said, my thought is always Stan Lee's biggest contribution to comics was deciding to write comics for smart 15-year-olds instead of dumb 8-year-olds, so that maybe since, like I said, since they couldn't flood the newsstands, the books got better. They would have to get better just by the math of it. Tales to astonish. If you have to get out 50 books a month,
yeah,
and all of a sudden that gets cut down to 8 books a month, those 8 books a month have to be better than the 50 books a month. I mean, there's no way around it. Unless you
Marvel
pick
1994
artists. What was that?
Marvel 1994. How many books were being put out, and how many of them were good?
Yeah.
And Atlas was not kicking butt in the 50s. Even with all of their titles combined, they were only number 5 in the industry.
Yeah. DC
number 1 was Dell.
DC was such a 800-pound gorilla for much of its career. I read this really great blog about it.
Dell's Walt Disney Comics and Stories was the longest. That
there
comic was the bestseller.
Pulling some Dell out
until the early 1960s. That was the bestseller on the newsstands. No. Atlas adapted to the code very quickly, and they didn't lose that much. In fact, when they put out the code, they launched more horror comics taking advantage of the fact that EC was run out. And they had a lot of westerns.
Martin Goodman selling his own distribution company did more damage to
definitely. In fact,
than anything else.
I once had this idea while I was looking at stuff at the Grand Comics database, and then I find a page. Yeah, Betsy. And then I found a page from one of those Tomorrow's magazines. Yeah. A guy said, Monroe Freilich Jr. Remember, you won't know that name, but he was the man responsible for creating Marvel Comics. Because Monroe Freilich Jr. was the guy who replaced Robbie Solomon as Marvel's business manager, which would be a COO. And one of the things that he did, as he was trying to do politicking inside the company, was to get rid of the distribution arm. Right. And he managed to convince Martin Goodman to sell it. And because of that, when American News Company went out of business because they were mob connected, that was the thing that left Marvel in a lurch, and they had to go with DC with I&D, the distributor, and that's how they got you can only publish 8 comics a month.
Okay, so now let's look at our
no, Mike. No, they did not fire a ton of artists because they could not pay. They fired the artists because they had they had backlog because they only had those 8 comics a month. They had one problem once in 1950, which led to a bunch of romance magazines being canceled in 1950 after two issues, and now, they had backlog again. But they never had any problem paying the artists. They were the second lowest paying company.
I know that Martin found a whole storage locker.
That didn't actually happen. What happened is that in 1950, Martin Goodman did a push, especially in the romance.
He's interviewed a bunch of these guys though, and they tell a different.
Yeah, that didn't happen. What happened? They did a push in 1956. There was a major push. What the problem came in April 57, which was when they canceled everything because American News Company disappeared overnight, and they couldn't get the comics distributed. That's how they canceled it. I think that Goodman had enough mob connections to know that something was going on because he had already canceled a few titles for the month of February, but there had been a push 8 months before that, and so it was not a problem of cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
No, they may have told that he couldn't pay them, but they couldn't hire them either. They didn't have they had that backlog. They had that backlog. You can see it because you can see if you look at the pages, at the first page of every story,
the job number,
and you'll see that most of them are compatible with job numbers from earlier years, and even in 1957 and 58, they were still putting out stuff with M and O and P codes, which was the stuff that came out in 55, 56. They had that much backlog.
Same thing happened to Don Daly in the 90s. He was the editor of the Punisher, and he commissioned so many stories and had such a backlog that the bosses at Marvel said, "Hey, stop commissioning stories until we publish these ones."
But they may have had even without, if they had kept the Atlas distribution company, there could have been some of those titles getting canned after the push, because that was normal for them. But if it wasn't for American News going out of business, they would not have had the problem keeping buying news stories. They would probably take a month or two of a breather. Instead, they depending on the title they were putting out, between 6 and 18 months. That's when the last of the, I have that somewhere here. I took notes of it.
And Horror Mike, Vic Carbonata might be confusing two events too, because the Comics Code and Marvel losing his.
I don't want to jump in here, but has anybody watched Horror Mike's documentary?
No, I have not.
I think that might be the missing piece here.
Well, no, I just know people confuse those two events all the time. Marvel letting a lot of people go, and the Comics Code.
There was no decrease in the number of titles published when the Comics Code came into force. There was a bunch of new horror/science fiction titles coming out in 1956. You can check the publishing dates. There was a bigger attempt to push on the teen humor, because those failed. It was the Patty Powers television comic.
Yeah.
Tim wants to say something.
That's not what I was saying. Something. I think we're going to have to call a truce here.
I get that the artist told you that, Mike, but if you the documentation, if you check the publishing schedule with the documentation that is visible from that publishing schedule, it does not make sense that they were let go because Atlas they didn't have money to pay the creators. They had money to pay the creators, and they did not put out fewer comics than they did when the Comics Code came into force.
And like it was to this day, I see comics historians confusing the Comics Code and Marvel's losing their distributor in the 50s.
Yeah,
I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I got this. This is going to tell me everything I need to know.
All right, I think
I
think Graphic Man has brought up something that's fair here, because the reason I'm saying call a truce is not saying we're not going to like compromise or like get anything really solved, but we have people who can speak on here, and then we have him in the comment.
Yeah,
and he's got a documentary we haven't watched, and But I think what here's like, I think Horror Mike needs to drop the documentary here, man, and maybe check it out. And
this might be a good Cavern discussion. Have him. He's got a camera and mic. He can come on and.
You can if you're. I don't think you can post links on the chat.
Okay.
Try to post it with.
Who knows Horror Mike? I don't know Horror Mike, but I've seen him comment and stuff. Is anybody here know him?
No.
Oh yeah, he has his own channel. Yeah.
Okay.
We could probably just look him up.
He's a filmmaker and a documentary. Yeah.
You got okay. Well, I mean, that's what I'm saying. If he wants to hop on here, can you send the link to him? Anybody?
Oh, I thought you had to leave. That's why I was saying it might be a future.
Oh, I made a phone call. I am going to. Well, I was getting ready to say I'm going to leave you guys for like 10 more minutes. I made some phone calls, and then I'm good to go. I mean, we're good to go. It's whatever you guys want to do. I left for 5 minutes and came back, and I'm like, wow. So, No,
I just want to get back to Stan Lee for a moment.
Yeah. I tell you what, if we'll get back to Stanley. Let's get something. Let's get this to be fair here, man. Graphic Man, do you have any links to?
I have his email, so
okay, yeah, get if he wants on here, and then like we'll go on to Stan Lee, and then I want to shut up and let get organic again, and then we have Wilson with his document. He's got some literature there to save us all. You know. I came down, man, and I'm like, what's going on? You know, I feel like you know what? I feel like John Travolta in Pulp Fiction. Every time I go to the bathroom, I come out, the shit's happening outside. You know,
like the Stan Lee thing. I'm just trying to get a timeline in my head where from this conversation we just had to make Marvel Comics even more improbable. One of the key elements was probably them only being able to publish 8 titles a month. That was like a key element.
Yeah, because of a contract. DC has a hold on the distribution. Yeah, the
distributor. But, what's his name? Goodman could no longer use his flood the market method. So they had to come up with a new method, and their method was to make some new and interesting comics, at least.
Well, they got innovative. I think adversity makes you innovative. And that's where we find out. That's where the wheels hit the road.
I don't know if it was adversity. I think no one was watching Stan Lee.
No. What I'm trying to say is that like they had to figure out how to get more of their characters out there, more books, more. You know, what can we do?
Right.
We got to do. It's like what you're saying. They're limited with what they can do.
But that made their books better because they were only hiring their best guys.
And what did they do? They ended up coming up with Tales to Astonish. Journey.
That was later. That was not at first.
Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Everything, it's all connected. The whole 60s era, everything, the 60s era with Marvel to me feels like everything led to something else. They set up a bunch of heroes. And
that's how improbable it was.
And then they turned around and you got the whole, now I'm getting confused. Anyway, they came out, you had 2 stories going on in one book. You know, you had the Hulk and, good God, I'm not going to get my box out, but they ended up becoming innovative on how they told the stories, made sure they had it. And then what did they do?
You mean that's Submariner?
They ended up taking the Hulk and the Fantastic Four and the Avengers and stuck them in Fantastic Four 26. They kept building up their stories to kept that buzz going. And
but that was later. At first, I'm just trying to get to the very beginning of how this also. The first thing was 8 comics, I would say. That put them behind. That put them out of Martin Goodman's comfort zone. I think he probably wasn't paying attention then. I mean, how much
Martin
attention
Goodman
do you think
basically abandoned comics at that time?
Yeah,
I think they had the 8 titles. He, like you said, Stan was just doing whatever he could do just to survive on 8 titles and left them alone. Because Marvel doesn't become Marvel until Steve Ditko creates the box. Right. And once the box is there, then they start. I think that's when the marketing happens.
Well, before then, let's go back before then. I don't even think I'm not even there yet in my timeline.
Okay.
Another, like I said, strange thing is once again, like I said, Martin Goodman's probably not paying attention. The only reason maybe comics still existed in his company was Stan Lee. Like I always say, like as Paolo points out, Martin Goodman fired his. Who was it, Paolo?
He fired one of his brothers. So whenever people mention that Stan Lee stayed there because he was the cousin, that has nothing to do with it. He would have if he would have fired Stan if he needed to.
If he was incompetent in some way, he probably would have fired. But
he had fired one of his brothers, and he also fired Robbie Solomon, who was Stan Lee's uncle. It was actually Robbie Solomon who hired Stan.
But I still think Stan Lee being a relative had something to do with him being the last man there.
Okay.
But because he was competent, and Martin Goodman was not paying that much attention to. If he had to fire Stan Lee, he probably would have, but he didn't have to fire him, so he kept him on.
Okay,
when did Atlas stop publishing comic books?
What was that?
When did Atlas stop publishing comics?
The
Because
Atlas
we-
logo disappears. Yeah, the first comics without the Atlas logo are the ones on with September 57 covers.
Yeah,
So
probably.
between 57 and then Fantastic Four #1, were comic books being published?
Yes.
Okay, so there was not a gap where there was nothing coming out.
No.
Okay,
But there were
That's-
only
that-
8 a month being published.
when did that start?
That
Ju-
started
in August 57? Let me check here. I have notes on this. I made. I actually have notes
Because
on this.
it's like, was there nothing going on when they were publishing what could technically be their last bastion of books? Things are closing down left and right.
Monster books.
That
and
was a
Twilight
possibility.
Zone like books. Yeah.
That was a possibility. Goodman could have thought about closing the company.
But he had that backlog of material that he was going to
Right,
print
that he already
and make
paid
his money
for,
back on.
and he
Right.
didn't want to lose money on that.
Right,
So
right.
that's probably why it was like, Stan, you could do this, do this.
So that's why it was still
He
open.
just wanted to publish, I'm guessing,
Yeah,
he just
yeah.
wanted to make his money back on the artwork that was sitting there.
Yeah,
And then
Yeah.
he just let Stan do what he's doing.
right.
Mhm.
And let Stan do what he likes. But I still think it was an important thing that Stan was a relative and Stan was competent. Like if it was you or me, he may have closed down. He may have closed down the comics after
Let
he.
me interject for just a minute here, because what it is, I'm kind of getting lost in
Okay.
what you're trying to figure out. Maybe
Tim Max in the back room.
awesome. So re-ask your question. What exactly?
I'm
are
trying to
you
figure
asking
out
here?
all the crazy
Oh, I know horror, Mike.
coincidences.
I know
all
you.
the crazy coincidences.
Hello.
Hey,
that
Oh,
led
there you
to
are.
Marvel Comics.
Hello.
existence. Good evening.
Now, Paulo, I've got a bone to pick with you. Just kidding. Actually, I do, but
yeah,
now,
but
too bad Breen's not here. Now we have. What was the
No, but
No, well,
you know,
here's
it's
the thing, Paulo. Here's
Mhm.
the thing, and this is
Mhm.
just what you said. This is my logic, and I think it's logical. You said that after the pre-code era at Atlas, they were only running 8 titles.
no. They were running
No.
8 titles when they went to were distributed by DC.
Okay, so then what was the change after they stopped the horror titles?
No, they stopped everything.
Yeah, exactly. So
They-
what are
they
they going to do with
but
those?
not
other-
after the code.
That had nothing. That was 2 years.
Yeah.
2.5 years after the code. They actually put out more comics when they put on the code.
I got you out of there, Wilson. I
Okay,
got you
yeah,
out of there.
yeah.
But it was.
Here's the problem, though.
Thank you.
Those comics were definitely not selling as well as the pre-code comics. That's
but they
an
were
absolute fact.
sure. But
And so they
sure.
were firing the artists, the secondary artists. They were not firing people.
They
like
fired
Paulo.
everyone.
They were firing people like
Everyone.
Vic-
They
Victor
didn't fire.
Carabata.
They didn't fire one artist. Carl Burgos, because Carl Burgos was the art director.
They fired Vic Carabata. I just told you that.
Yes, they fired Vic Carabata. Yes, but not
Okay.
because of the comics code.
Here's
Yes, they
no.
did.
Let
It
me
wasn't
jump in
enough.
here.
You,
Paulo,
okay,
Paulo. That indirectly though, that's what.
No.
That's indirectly.
Let me explain
Yes.
this to the horror man.
It could be argued indirectly that that was the
they have
reason.
nothing to do with each other.
Mhm.
What happened
Well,
was in
but-
1957, Marvel, Martin Goodman always had his own distribution company. This is
Yeah.
post code. Everything, the code happened. Marvel still went on fine,
Right.
or Atlas. In 57, Martin Goodman has his own distribution company with a vice president who ran it. They hired a new guy who was Paolo. What was his name?
Monroe Freilich Jr.
Monroe Phillip would made a power play within Atlas, within Martin Goodman's magazine company. He convinced Martin Goodman that they could make more money not distributing their own comics.
Okay, guys, I want to
And
make my phone call.
there was a-
Graphic man, you're in
Weird.
charge.
There was these two vice presidents within Martin Goodman's company battling each other for control, the young guy and the old guy. The young guy won. Martin Goodman sold his I don't even know if I think he dismantled it. He didn't
He
even
he
sold
dismantled
wherever
it.
It was gone after that.
Yeah,
And
and a bunch of retailers were not happy with that.
Right. And so this younger vice president then farmed out the distribution to this company who was caught up in congressional hearings against the mob. So, what was the name of the distribution company, Paolo?
American News Company.
American News Company. There were congressional hearings about American News Company being mobbed up. They went out of business immediately. Now, Martin Goodman has no way to distribute his comics. And that's when everybody got fired. And that's when he found out Stan Lee had a backlog of stuff. And that's when Marvel could only distribute 10 comics a month through through DC's distributor. But people conflate the two events. People.
But Vic Carabata is not conflating anything.
Right, but he probably
in 1955, when the Comics Code Authority kicked in, he was fired by Atlas because there wasn't
and I have the numbers to prove it. I have his publishing schedule right here. Thanks to Mike'sAmazingWorld.com, I can tell you exactly in which month, in which year.
I'm just telling you, Paulo. That's what he said.
I'm sure, but
deny that is what he did not say, Paulo.
Right, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that
doesn't mean
Vic does not. What I'm saying is Vic is conflating the two. Vic is conflating the two.
He's quite clear on it. He said it in the interview. He's saying
that doesn't mean he's right.
Well,
when you have evidence to show he's wrong, wait a second.
But you can't, Jared. You cannot sit there and say, "Yeah, he wasn't fired because of that," because you weren't there. I interviewed him. That's what he told me.
I'm sure.
What the hell?
Works. If Paolo can,
Jesus Christ, you guys cannot tell me what reality is. I interviewed the guy,
Vic Carabata.
Jesus Christ,
Marvel.
What the
Marvel?
Fuck?
Vic Carabata actually had more work after the code started at Marvel after the code started. I have the number of stories published right here. It went from 1 a month to 3 a month.
When? What for? What?
In 1955, the comic starts with January 55 covers, and a couple of months later, Carabata had more work from Marvel than before that.
You're saying work, but was he getting a paycheck after 55?
Yes, because it was regular. It was regular, all the way until American News Company went out of business, and the last comic that was published was in October 56. That may be when Goodman knew
right now.
So
that may be when Goodman knew that he was going to lose a distributor.
What's that?
You do any fishing, Wilson?
No, although I own at least 7 tackle boxes.
All right.
Are there art supplies in them or tackle?
2 is art supplies. The rest is actually tackle. My stepdad was an avid fisherman. He loved fishing. Now, I always thought that he just liked really fishing. What it is that we were poor and fishing was easy to do to get us food. So it was, we may have not grown up with a lot of money, but we always ate. Yeah. And so I would fish with him. And after he passed, we went through storage recently, and I did not know how many tackle boxes that he owned. And all the various knives. Okay. So I'm hoping the knives really are from just the tackle boxes, and that my stepdad wasn't a serial killer, and we just found his stashes all over the place. But there's just just a lot of tackle boxes.
Hold on, yeah, I'm looking at this thing, Strange Tales of the Unusual.
Yeah, that was the last work you put up.
That was. You're right. That was 1957.
Yeah, I'm saying I know from personal experience. In case you don't know me, Wilson and I both worked with Marvel, and I worked with Marvel in the 90s.
Think he was. I'm sorry. Yeah, he was.
He was right. I don't have a problem.
Up.
Yeah, I'm sure that Vic thinks is conflating the two. And given when did you interview him?
It is true. It is true. Yeah, this is 2019.
60 years ago.
And Everett Raymond Kinsler, and they were all in their 90s.
Right.
It was amazing that they could actually talk to me for an interview.
Yeah, I get it.
But he was like, I tell you, and you'll see it in the documentary. He says directly, he's like, well, I remember, 1955 when they had the hearings, and shortly after that, they let me go. I talked to Stan, and he was like, I'm sorry, we just don't have any more work for you. And that's exactly what he says in the documentary.
Yeah, and
So
I believe
was like, oh, well.
Sure, I have no problem with it, and I fully believe that he's sincere when he says that.
He just mixes things.
Yeah, but
and Jared, you're absolutely right. And I didn't realize you worked for Marvel.
Yeah, but I know people who mix up events from the. I just happen to be the person at Marvel. I worked in the bullpen who took a lot of pictures, and I always wrote down names and dates on pictures.
Right.
So I know when events happened, and people are always like, "How do you know when that happened?" I'm like, "Only because I wrote it down. Otherwise, the years mush together." And other people are like, "What year? That? Oh, I think that happened in '92." And I look it up, and I'm like, "No, that was '94." So people don't have great memory.
He was 90, I believe, when I did the interview, and amazingly enough, what really astounded me was that he was 90. I think Joe Sinnott was 94. And Everett Raymond Kinsler was 95. They were all still working.
Wow.
Yeah. All of them. Victor Carabato would go to like comic conventions and comic stores and draw stuff, like do sketches for people. And he was 90. And then Everett Raymond Kinsler had his own studio in New York City. He was only in the comics biz for like 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
Then he went on, he did a lot of covers, and so, man, you would know he did stuff. He did like illustrations for the Shadow pulps in the 40s and so forth. But he ended up doing portraits of celebrities, presidents, political figures, all kinds of people. So I went to his studio, and at that time he was still painting.
Yeah.
I was just like, how the hell, if you could imagine like being 94, 95 years old and you're still painting these portraits, it just blew my mind. Shit, I would be amazed if I lived to be 80, much less functional, at the age of 94 or 95. That's insane.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's it. That is the key, because and Joe Sinnott was the same way. He was still doing his sketches. And going to conventions. He was in his 90s.
Right.
They never retired.
Yeah.
That is the thing. They never retired from the arts. That is why they lived so long. I'm thoroughly convinced of that, because they were all still very
having something
about
to
what
do
they did.
is really important.
Exactly, and popular. Yeah. I mean, Joe Sinnott, man, he had I went to an Albany Comic Con to interview him. He had a line like going around the dealers area,
and he's got his sons with him.
Stuff. Yes, Mark.
I imagine that's really important to him.
Oh, totally.
But like that he conflated those two events. He's not the first one to do that.
Yeah, Victor Carabato, and he does. So in that interview, it's wrong. Basically, is now that I realize, like in my documentary, he just mix things up.
Yeah, even Jack.
But this is a fact, Paulo, and I will stick to this. Hundreds of artists lost their jobs because of the comics.
Sure. I mean, quality went out of business.
God, Stanley Morse, all those people, they closed up shop. So, and there were some talented people. It was a very dark time for a lot of artists. I mean, God, I don't know what caused it, but Jack Cole, who I think did some of the great pre-code horror art and covers. He famously did the Electrocuted Man cover, and I believe that was for Web of Evil, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe it was.
Sounds right.
I think it was Web of Evil, but he took his own life in 1957, 1958.
Right.
And I think it was a lot of these things. Other people too, did commit suicide after the code, because it really literally devastated the industry. I think that it was in the 20th century, I believe, and you guys may correct me on this, it was the largest case of industrial censorship in the 20th century.
Could have been. Did you have something to say, Wilson?
In the United States, probably.
In the United States, that's I meant to say.
Sure. I don't know if you're aware, but there's the French had a comics code in 1949, and I think I mentioned.
I did not realize that.
Yeah, I think I mentioned you were there when I mentioned it. Yeah, unholy alliance between the French Communist Party and the Catholic Church.
That was me.
Yeah, I think I was there too. Horror Mike, what is the name of your documentary so we can look it up? Because I do want to watch it.
Haunted Thrills.
Just
put that in, it pops up, it's number 1.
Even Jack Kirby conflates stories from different decades. When he tells the story that he went back to Marvel and Stan was crying and Stan was a teenager. Yeah. Well, Stan was 37 when he came back.
That was the thing. And Victor was saying, "Oh God, it was a terrible time. A lot of us lost our jobs." And I'm like, "Oh God,
time compresses."
So that's when you started talking about this. I was like, "What?" So it obviously wasn't as bad for Atlas, but many companies, it was the end. For many companies, it was just the end. And you know how that goes. I mean, it didn't take long. And of course, William Gaines had already figured it out with Mad Magazine and so forth. When the mid-'60s hit, you had James Warren, Warren Publications, Eerie Creepy. They knew that they could put out magazines and bypass the Comics Code Authority.
I actually recently read something about Mad Magazine. Oh, where did I read it? But the reason Mad went to a magazine was not to escape the code, but to keep Harvey Kurtzman. Kurtzman,
maybe.
Yeah, Harvey Kurtzman, they said, wanted to work on something fancier than a comic. He wanted a magazine. So that's why it was just kind of good fortune that it skirted the code too. But Gaines wanted to keep Kurtzman. That's what I can't remember where I read it.
Well, Myron Foss, Eerie Publications.
Right.
He was the dude he was the guy. He was neck and neck with Jim Warren Publications, and he was the guy that literally took those pre-code stories and republished them in magazine form starting in 1965 with Weird. And he was the guy that had the battle going on with Warren to get Eerie, the name Eerie for a magazine. That's why Warren beat him to the punch and put out the Ashcan version of Eerie #1. That is why that exists. And of course, then Myron Foss was forced to call his company Eerie Publications, and he put out Weird, which was the first magazine. Weird number. You know how his numbering was? It was just like the freaking pre-code things, like Volume 10, #1, or some weird thing. But that's what happened. Yeah, Weird magazine, man.
Weird man. Yeah, I haven't seen too many of those.
It was all pre-code stuff. It was literally, he would literally just take them and reprint them, or he would have artists redo them to make them look a little more modern for the 60s. So he had these great South American artists. Like there were a few artists from Argentina that were doing these, redraws of the original pre-code stuff. And some of that stuff is awesome. As far as I'm concerned, I think some of that stuff rivals the Eerie Creepy stuff. Okay. Although, in the bigger sense, I think Eerie and Creepy got the greatest artists. Reed Crandall, Frank Frazetta, all those people, man. It was hard to beat.
Yeah, I remember I got the first couple of volumes that Dark Horse published of Creepy and Eerie. That was the first time I had seen those. And they were really nice. I would say the guys of that era too could draw suits. Al Williamson could draw suits like nobody's business. Everybody else in there, because I guess that's what men wore all the time, was suits. They could draw suits like
hats, classic hats and stuff. And the stuff the stories were so good too. Yeah, especially in the first several years of Eerie and Creepy. It was just a great balance of fantastic artists and really good stories.
And a lot of the EC guys. I'd read somewhere that it was almost a continuation of EC. And
Reed
then when I finally
Crandall.
read them, I was like, oh, I see what they mean. A lot of the same artists who did EC comics.
You know, yeah. It was they he really got the, you know, and Myron Foss didn't have to worry because at least half of the stuff he was publishing were simply reprints. He was just, put him in his magazine, and then of course he would hire these artists from South America to do the redraws. And he had a few artists, those insane covers, you guys, of the Eerie publications. They were just like bloody and gory and just really, sick. In other words, he had a few artists that just did those exclusively. They just did those, kept doing those things, and that's what the newsstand magic, right?
I wonder who owns that stuff now.
Oh my God, yeah, that's a good. I've got some. They made prints from the covers, from like 10 different covers, and I have several of those. They're just the art only.
Because
it's okay, Howler. I fixed everything while you were gone.
Thank you, Graphic Man. I appreciate it. I was imagining coming back and
there's like blood everywhere.
Horror Mike realized that he may have been conflating two events. The artist he was interviewing. That's all it is.
Victor Carabata. Well, there's no arguing the dates.
Yeah.
Once we started, and I looked up, what Paulo was saying. It's obvious in the Grand Comics database that Carabata worked until 57. So he was not fired or let go in 55.
It was just a 90-year-old guy confusing 1955 with 1957.
Well,
I mean,
well, he seemed lucid enough.
I have one question.
And we're going to still watch the documentary. It doesn't matter. I still plan to watch it.
Oh, it's great. Just the Everett Raymond Kinsler stuff is fantastic. As a matter of fact, I have the raw video. I think, Graphic Man, were we talking about that? The raw video. I've got the raw video of the interviews.
Probably on Graphic channel,
yeah, right. With Everett Raymond Kinsler, where it's just like 45 minutes of Kinsler. We're talking about all kinds of stuff. Him doing, working for Smith and Street, doing, shadow illustrations, doing the covers. I believe his career spans 40 to 60. It's kind of incredible to believe, but his career spanned almost 80 years.
Wow.
If you can believe that. He was working in the 40s, and he was working up until his death in 2019.
Wow.
It's just hard to freaking believe, man. I just, the guy was very robust. He was very lucid. When you see him I think he is the liveliest of the three, because he's just, when I walked into the studio, he had his smock on and he was in the middle of painting something.
Wow.
Doing a portrait of somebody, so it was totally crazy. But the Myron Foss thing. Who has that art? You were saying who has?
I was wondering. I wonder who has the copyright. Who has the art? Does any of it exist?
Okay, let's go back a little bit. A lot of that pre-code stuff, in the first place, is public domain.
Right.
Okay, so that's why that's why you've got like a dozen different companies throughout, the last 50 years.
But the art doesn't really exist for it.
It does.
I
owned a dozen pieces.
Oh, because a lot of that public domain stuff I see. There's scans of the printed comic.
Yeah, there's a lot of pre-code art still out there.
Oh, okay.
It's great, man. George Russo's. I had some George Russo stuff. He worked for EC for a while.
I worked with him at Marvel. He was at Marvel up until he died.
Yeah.
Right. God, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And how long did he work until?
Till the day he died.
I think
he was just
approximate year.
He would come in. He was the cover colorist from the 70s up until he died in 96, I think.
Okay. Damn.
I think so.
And he would come in. chat with him. It was amazing that he'd been in the business that long too.
Yeah, well, Russo's he worked for
colored
EC
Batman,
Comics.
the first Batman book.
Wow. Yeah, and he also worked independently on other pre-code horror, for other. I think he did some stuff for Standard, Adventures into Darkness, and Out of the Shadows, of which I had a few original pieces, but I had an entire Jack Cat story from what was it called? The Bride of Death. That was the original. It was only a 3-page story, but I had the whole damn thing. It was for a while I was totally obsessed only with original art. And so I had by the end I had like 12 pieces, and I had these things hanging in my apartment in Peru when I was living with my ex-wife. I mean, it was I was totally stunned the way that you can really look at these pieces in detail, see all of the flaws, all of the whiteout, all the all the shit, the mistakes that they made, and in some cases. Things like they would draw like Jack Katz on the at least on the pieces I had, he drew figures on the borders, like just strange little figures and stuff, like he was practicing to do something. So you see all these weird little doodles and stuff.
One of my favorite George Russo stories was this is probably right around 95. The internet's a new thing, right? It was before every computer at a place was hooked up to the internet. So I happened to be doing the typesetting, which had like the one computer that was hooked up to the internet at Marvel. So George Russo's comes in one day and he's like, "Oh, I hear this thing about the internet." He's like, "Can you do a search on me and see what comes up?" I'm like, "Sure, George." And so I put his name into the search engine, whatever search engine we were using in 95. Hit return, and the very first link said, "George Russo's worst inker ever?" Like,
what?
Bastard.
Oh,
damn! Ouch!
Damn.
Ouch!
That would have had to have been George Bell, though, not George.
George Bell was George Russo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of his pseudonyms. I think that's the only one he had that I was aware of.
I probably wrote that.
He passed away.
Ouch!
He passed away February 2000.
February 2000. February 2000.
2000.
So this may have been later. This may have been like 98, 99, whatever that was. So he died in 2000. That's right. Mark Grunwald was 96.
Oh.
I gotta tell you, these pages that I had of Russo's from Out of the Shadows, Standard Publishing, were insanely great. I mean, the detail and the artistry of this, it was amazing. I was just like, those are some of my favorite pages of the entire bunch,
Well, I think sometime in the early 60s, George was Vince Colletta before Vince Colletta.
Yeah.
Where if you had to get a job, if Stan needed a job inked over the weekend, George would get
George Russo's.
Yeah.
And I had some pages that were Iger shop.
Oh,
and those are just fantastic. Yeah, Iger shop, the whole thing was they just had like, I don't know, it was almost like an assembly line kind of deal where some people would, do of course, the pencils, the inks, but some people would just do the figures. Some people would do the buildings, the backgrounds.
Oh, yeah.
They would do like a whole assembly line process. But you could tell in certain cases what artist was doing what, like George Webb. I believe it was George Webb. George Webb. He was the guy that liked to do those circular panels, and all of his characters kind of like their faces looked kind of generic. I know you would if you read like one of those early, like Haunted Thrills or whatever, those comics, you would see what I'm saying. He was good. He was very confident as an artist, but he just had this kind of generic way about him, that I don't know.
I've got a couple of random old, I think they're Golden Age pages by Gil Fox.
Gil Fox.
He was a guy who did stories here and there. I found them like 15 years ago on eBay.
Wow.
And they're like for some reason they weren't even like the original art section of they were like someplace weird where I got these 2 old Golden Age pages, a 2-page story of Poison Ivy, this little cherub-like thing. Really nicely inked. I don't remember how much it was, but they were cheap. They were like less than $100 a page. I don't even know if they were that much.
Right.
And that's like, wow.
A lot of the pages I bought originally were less than $100.
Yeah.
This was at a time, this was like, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I mean, things happen like weird and quickly in comics. You know what I'm saying? Because 5, 6, 7 years ago, you could pick up some pre-code stuff really inexpensively.
Yeah.
And it's really good stuff. Right now, seems to be, I don't know what you guys think, but it's red hot. I mean,
I've heard that, but I haven't tried to buy any original art in so long that I don't know.
It's nuts. It's totally nuts.
I try to keep an eye on it only because, as Jared mentioned, we both worked at Marvel. What I did at Marvel, I did art returns. I returned the original artwork back to the artist.
Oh, wow.
So there was at one time, I spoke to every single artist on the phone or at conventions. And so I try to keep an eye on about original art and things that happen here and there and try to figure out over the years what happened to the artwork. And in my own investigations, every story is true, every story is a lie, and it's wild. And between other people's recollections, like I solved the mystery because there was a box that was in my office that I left in the office for a whole year. Because the person before me who did a wonderful job of organizing the artwork, but she did not read comics. So there was things there that just wasn't really touched. And she told me, "Oh, this box, it's been here before I came here. Don't worry about it. Don't touch it." So I didn't touch it. I didn't worry about it for about a year. After years, like, this is my office, I'm going to open them up. I opened it up, and this artwork there from 1953, I believe.
God.
Still addressed to the Empire State Building Marvel office, addressed to Stan.
Yes.
Open it up, and it's the romance books. No covers, just interiors. Romance books and the kind of like the teen kids books and stuff like that. Model Millie model and stuff like that. But the box itself, I don't remember the exact number. I want to say it's 7 of 9. Did not know what happened to the other ones until years later when I'm reading a Jim Shooter blog where he talks about when they found these boxes of artwork and then how many boxes they were. And then I actually found one of these boxes that they originally found back sometime in the 80s. So it's like, okay, so there are boxes out there. And I found a good chunk of the artists and sent those back. But again, it's one of those things where it's like I've heard bits and pieces of stories because I was in contact with a few other art returns people who did work at Marvel or was still working at Marvel, because Bob Harris did it for a short while. I think Nell Yomtoff did it as well. And I heard stories about where the artwork went, where it was found. There was artwork found in a cave in California because film was being kept there.
Oh, there it is.
And all that artwork was sent to me, and there were a bunch of covers, Daredevil covers, Gil Kane covers, beautiful stuff. And again, it's like a lot of it, yes, things got stolen.
Check it out, guys.
But things got misplaced easily.
Yeah.
You guys may want to just speaking of this original stuff. I still have this. This is an original typed manuscript, pre-code horror. You guys ever hear of Ken Fitch? Ken Fitch is a writer, lived in New York. and he wrote stories. He wrote in particular. Well, this was actually a script. I'm going to try to bring it in for Weird Terror #9. Okay, and so there it is. And as you can, hopefully you can see it. My camera sucks. I'm getting a new camera, by the way, guys. So I just want to let you know. But on the top here it says he submitted it 7/9/1953. He got paid. He got paid $49 on 7/23/1953. So $49 for a story, and it's literally the original typed manuscript.
That is cool.
Hold on.
So there you go, and this goes along with
Show it again, Mike.
Hold it up again. You're so low.
Here we go. Here we go. I'm gonna. There's the
Wow.
the header submitted 7/9, and I'm gonna go down here, and it's called Shadows Before, and it's for. There's where he got paid $49, 7/23/1953. And it's written here, and it is indeed in Weird Terror #9. And there's the address he sent it to there. Trying to get that in there.
You get it right there. Right there.
There we go. Alan Hardy, I believe is that? Yeah, Alan Hardy Associates. They're in New York on 5th Avenue. So the thing is that in Haunted Thrills, the artists were talking about going to the Empires when they were working for Stan Lee, Victor Carabat and Joe Sinnott. They would talk about going to the Empire State Building, and they'd find Stan Lee, and he's behind his desk, and he's like got these. He used legal pads, those yellow legal pads. That's what he used to type on, and he was just typing these manuscripts. And you ripping out the page of the legal pad and typing and then he would give a story to, Joe Sinnott to go and do, so that was it. What happened to all of those is my question. God, could you imagine some Stan Lee stories?
I was just looking for something else, but I found this piece of ephemera. This is Jack Abel drew this for me one day.
Nice.
These must be the foothills.
Oh, wow. Jack Abel, man.
This paper was like just some piece of notepaper that now looks like an old piece of parchment since it was done in the...
Yeah.
Whatever this paper was made out of, it's not stable.
Whoa, that's totally cool. Jack Abel, man, he did a ton of pre-code stuff.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I mean, he was another one of those guys that, and there were some other artists like, you guys know, like Harvey Comics. They did Chamber of Chills and all of those wonderful.
Did you know Sid Jacobson died
stuff.
this week?
Was he Harvey?
He was the editor of Harvey Comics for 30 years.
Okay, and during that period?
Yeah.
The pre-code period?
50s all the way till the 70s.
Then he was during that.
Wait a minute.
Then he was Marvel's Star Comics editor in all through the 80s. He was still there in the early 90s when I was there. He just, I think he was 90 and just died. And he was still writing, too. He was still doing stuff.
Let me get a second just to bookmark something. We got people coming in and out and everything like that. So this is probably the greatest episode of Cavern of Chaos ever. I'm wondering if Graphic Man's ever going to come back. You need to go back from this point and really watch the whole show. But if you don't have time, you want to get to the juicy stuff, back up about 40 minutes. Okay. We had Paolo and Horror Mike going at it. Horror Mike was sitting there.
Hey, I had to concede.
All caps. And then Paolo was yelling back. Graphic Man had information. He had the social media contact information, and we brought Horror Mike in, and then I left. And now we're all just friends building bridges. This is fantastic.
Howler thought he was going to come back and find like blood on the screen. we should have done something like,
I'm making phone calls because there's like a comic book convention tomorrow, and I'm like, guys, I really got to go. Are we meeting or not? And then I came back and everybody was like, we're good.
Graphic Man this week, he's like Chris Geruso, who sometimes comes on and he sits back and doesn't say much. But he's like, this is just like watching a great podcast, and I can talk back to it every now and then.
Well, he's been on my channel before, but it's like now that the family's all together, he can come over. I'm wondering if, it's like when you brought that girlfriend over to see your dad out in his underwear and, all this stuff. Like, I wonder if they're going to come back. This is a trial by fire. But this is going to be the greatest episode of Cavern to Chaos ever, and we've done some good ones,
Now, don't you guys think that most of that original art, like I can't speak for Atlas in particular, but it seems to me like a lot of that stuff was simply destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, they dumped it. In other words, they just dumped it, or they burned it, or they did something, right?
Well, I've been waiting. When Stan Lee was to pass away, there were people, and this was like on auction shows like you find on cable, but they would find complete sets. And this is like in California, I think. They found complete sets of Marvel Comics original art. And supposedly, Stan Lee had a building outside of his building that they suspected is where he had a lot of that missing original art. So when people were waiting for him to pass away to get their hands on it. But when he passed away, I've heard nothing. So it's probably a myth they built up.
I always want to know, there's a story that I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s, when they were I think it was just before they were giving out original art. Somebody at Marvel stole a whole bunch of original art, including Amazing Fantasy 15.
Yeah.
Which is how that eventually ended up in the Smithsonian, the original art to that is. But I've always heard, whenever I've read about it, people have said, oh, we know exactly who stole it, but nobody names names.
Well,
who stole it?
Well, see, now we're getting into conspiracy. Now we're getting into conspiracy theory here, but it's coming back to me. It was a complete Fantastic Four issue by Kirby that actually still had his notes on it on what the dialogue was supposed to be.
Yeah, all of his original art still has.
That's what I'm trying to get at.
So they erased them, but not always fully.
But what they were saying, and I don't know, they didn't get into how they, clarified this or fact checked it or whatever. That's why I'm saying I'm willing to say this is conspiracy. Is that this was one of the sets of art, the original art that was stolen with what you're talking about.
Like Fantastic Four #1 art has never been found.
But now you're saying this art ended up in the Smithsonian?
Yeah, it was about, I don't know how. Once again, conflating years. Like I said, this is why I don't blame that artist for confusing 57 and 50.
Yeah.
I think everything was 5 years ago now. 5 or 10 years ago, the original art from Amazing Fantasy 15 surfaced, the Spider-Man story. And it made everybody's like, "Oh, the original," and there became a big issue who owned it, because Marvel, it was stolen. It was stolen in that batch. Matter of fact, it was offered to a local comic shop in New York City, and they went, no thanks, because they knew it was stolen by an employee of Marvel. This is in like the early 80s. And now a few years ago, it showed up again, and the owner of it, rather than go through who owns it, does he own it, he donated it to the Smithsonian. So now, matter of fact, you can go to the Smithsonian and get high-res scans of the original art.
That's great. Well, that's where it should be.
Yeah.
That's really where it should be, where people can actually see it.
Fantastic Four #1.
The high-res scan from your home. You could go to the Smithsonian website and see the actual scans as well. If you're in Washington, stop by, take a look. But you can actually go to Library of Congress and actually look at the artwork right from.
But if Amazing Fantasy 15 was in that batch of artwork stolen, and I don't forget the year, 1980. What else was in there?
Right, exactly. And not only that, but we're talking about Amazing Fantasy. What about the original art from Timely? for example, in the 1940s.
Who knows if that
How
exists?
about the original Bernard Bailey Spectre art from the 1940s from More Fun Comics? Where did that stuff go? Jesus, I mean, there are
Paper
things,
drive.
Yeah.
paper drive.
I know
Something.
it wasn't in Marvel's warehouses because in the early 2000s, Ike Perlmutter, the owner of Marvel, the world's cheapest man, was
Yeah.
closing down Marvel's warehouses and selling everything that was in them. I don't like he was any comics that were in Marvel's because Marvel used to have
man.
warehouses full of stats,
Yeah, of
and
course,
film,
of
and
course.
comics. And he was getting rid of all
He
that.
was just dumping them, literally.
Just dumping. He would sell them on eBay. He actually had somebody who worked in the Marvel offices sell stuff on eBay for him.
Yeah, I'm
Well,
trying to
that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I'm I'm having a little bit of problem tracking you guys because
Yeah.
you guys are going deep and stuff like that. But I actually have one or two Golden Age comics here where on the front page it says "Give to the paper drive for the war." Front page
Wow.
for you to get
There you
into
go.
the comic. So you would buy a comic and they would tell you to go ahead and put it in a paper drive. So when Wilson popped up and said paper drive for the original art, I was like, yes.
Could've done that, yeah.
Well, and during the uproar in the 50s with the free code, who knows how many millions of comics were burned, destroyed. I mean, they had massive bonfires, which I show in my documentary. I mean, they were just literally, I mean, that is why, that has a lot to do, obviously, with the reason why these pre-code horror and crime comics are so expensive and rare.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I think the art, if you look at some of those things, is just fantastic and it's as good as anything else.
Right.
But the fact that they were destroyed makes the value just go through the freaking roof. But the original art on some of that stuff, you see, that's where it gets interesting because that stuff wasn't burned.
No.
I mean, that, obviously people got it. I had some of it. Other people, God, if you go to Metropolis Collectibles in New York City, that's Vincent Zerzolo. If you ever get a chance and go to New York City, well, should I say go to New York City? No. I'm not sure. I went there in 2019 to interview Vincent Zerzolo, and I got, and there's a ton of footage. There's footage of his shop. This guy has just got an amazing collection of original art. It's like a gallery when you walk into the showroom.
Right.
It's fantastic. And
I've always been meaning to go.
If you ever get a chance, check it out. It's fantastic. He is just across the spectrum. He has got, from day one, Action Comics #1 on his wall, all the way through to at least to the 90s, I guess. Although less, it's probably concentrated from the 40s to the 70s. I would say that's kind of the spectrum. But wow, and that's something that when you started talking about that art in the Smithsonian,
right,
there should be a huge museum, a comic book art museum dedicated to
there
all
used
of
to
this
be
stuff. Yeah, and I thought there
Steve
was.
Jeppy had one, but I think he closed it down a few years ago.
That should be something like there should be a fund or something where everybody, like all comic book fans, donate $1 a year. They would fund it.
Also used to be one.
That would do it.
There used to be one across the river from me in Westchester, New York. There was a museum of cartoon art. I went to college over there. We used to go to it, but then it closed. It was in an old castle house. Then it closed down and moved to Florida. I don't know if it's still open. But that was pretty cool.
Do you know where in Florida?
I don't remember. It was called the Museum of Cartoon Art, I think.
Museum of Cartoon Art, because I'm in Florida currently.
So
okay. I could check it out.
It used to be in Westchester, New York. Mid '80s, I went to college there. My friend Ed and I used to pop over there all the time. It was, I must say, that was the first time I really appreciated Golden Age Superman. The original art for Golden Age Superman blew me away more than the printed page did.
I see what you're saying. I've never seen any of the original art for Golden Age Superman. That would be fantastic. That would be like something. That's why I'm saying, like, to see like something like the Golden Age Spectre, Bernard Bailey, like original art. That would just be absolutely mind blowing, because it's not that when you look at that art, you don't go, oh my God, this guy was a genius, because he was very young at that time, right? 1940, early 40s. The art is crude, but those stories are great. I mean, I've got the volume, DC put out volume 1 of the Spectre. Oh, they reprinted all of those. I've got that. And man, it's insane. It's some of my favorite Golden Age stuff by far.
Let me. Well, hold on, man. Don't interrupt.
Sorry, Howler.
No, you're cool. I'm going to jump in here. I've told you guys about the flooding going on around here. It made the news and all that stuff.
Yeah,
we're going to wrap it up in about 20 minutes. It's already gone in and out on me. You guys,
I got to roll out in a few minutes anyway. So
yeah. Okay. So about 20 minutes. That'll be 9:00 Eastern Standard Time, and we'll just wrap it up then, because I'm just basically losing the internet, man. So
okay,
go for it, man. And Graphic Man, how you hanging in there, brother? How you hanging in there?
I'm being paged, but I'm stalling. So
okay.
Yeah, I wonder because you guys show, like, for instance, my Golden Age. I've got Golden Age pre-code sci-fi and horror stuff, but you guys have like the real Golden Age. You know how Captain Strangelove says the Atom Age? I kind of agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that early 50s pre-code is really Golden Age per se. I think it entered into a new realm.
Well, it's tough. It's tough to say, because the Golden Age and the Silver Age were really named for superheroes.
Exactly. That was the whole thing. And the pre-code horror and crime and westerns and stuff was not that. It was totally different.
I want to be that guy again. There's so many channels over the years that have come and gone. There used to be a show with Finally Designed with me and Constable Bromstar, where we really went into detail on a lot of this stuff. But that Atomic Age you're talking about, it's gone. But there's a channel where we had a fantastic talk around 2013 with Captain Strangelove, where we went into detail about it, got into the Martian Manhunter, got into the sci-fi stuff. And it was one of those times where I felt like Strangelove had a moment that night. I mean, it was really good. I just hate that it's gone and lost. We can get him on the Atomic Age again to get him to talk about it.
Yeah, and he does
do that again. Yeah,
he's got a couple of videos where he talks about it. And like, that's where I got into. That's how I eventually found all of you guys, Graphic Man, and so forth, through and Gratu, obviously. But it was Captain Strangelove. He's had his channel on for what, like 10 years or something?
No, probably like 2008 or 9.
So longer, 15 years.
Yeah.
So years ago, like, I was in Peru watching his stuff, like, and he would like show his Atom Age, pre-code stuff. And I was like, whoa, that is just like the most insane looking shit I've
what's funny? I was just commenting. We have one friend, he used to work at Marvel, Barry Dutter. He was an editor there. And now he deals comics now out in LA. He's Southern California. He buys comic collections and sells them. So he's always on Facebook showing his stuff. And I always joke with him, because he just showed one of the books he just picked up was, do you remember that Wolverine alternate cover that was a swipe of the EC comic cover with like Sabretooth holding Wolverine's head? And he was like, oh, here's one of the modern comics I just picked up. I always joke with him, because that comic is 15 years old now. Mm-hmm. And it's like amazing to me. It's like modern comics is the era that's never gonna end. I'm like, the Silver Age and the Golden Age, I don't even sure if they lasted 15 years, but the modern age has been going on since like 1987.
That is true. You're absolutely right. Got it. It's hard to believe, though. Speaking of time spans and everything, this is the 40th anniversary of the Rocketeer. Yeah, I mean, the Rocketeer is 1982.
Yeah,
Can you believe that? Just kind of put your mind around that one. I mean,
getting into what you're talking about here now, but I showed the first time that the Kingpin popped up in Daredevil and told the story how John Byrne suggested Frank Miller did it, and then I revealed at the time that it was 40 years ago. I had Sleepy Reader and a couple people freaking the hell out that book was 40 years ago.
Yeah,
and I didn't think about that all the time. But you know, when it comes to like actual comic book history, if you read the books, the Silver Age actually could arguably went from 1958 to 85 with the death of the Flash, the way they did it in DC. So all these eras and times and stuff, that's the fun stuff to talk about. What was the Atomic Age? When did this really end? What started this? Stuff like that. And I wish a lot more people and channels would get back to that, man. You know,
I always point out too, when people, which they always do, call Spider-Man 300 a modern age book. And I'm like, Spider-Man 300 is closer in time to Amazing Fantasy 15 than it is to the latest issue of Spider-Man.
Who are these people you're talking to there? Because like we got to get them on. We'll straighten them out. You know,
it's easy to think like to think of that as the modern age because what we the ages kind of got crystallized when with the beginning of the direct market, or at least when they started making exclusive comics for the direct market, and that became the professionalization of being a fan. So everything that happened since the early 80s, it created a sort of cultural experience where that keeps preserves every comic in the same way, so everything is considered modern age, kind of because of the fans and not so much because of whatever was going on creatively. I don't like to think, although I don't agree with modern interpretations of how you divide the ages. I like Jamie Colville's idea that both the emergence of the Comics Code and the 2 reviews of the Comics Code mark ages, although there may be some intermediate points in there. Personally, I like to think that the Bronze Age does not end with Watchmen or Dark Knight Returns. It starts in 1981 when they start making exclusives for the direct market.
Yeah. See, and what's cool about this is that these conversations are great, but it just shows that you're talking to people that actually know comics. Does that make sense? Like you've got to be knowledgeable to have these talks.
I make an allowance for a Copper Age.
Well, that's just I understand that's a kind of but there's really only 4 ages that everybody accepts. Copper Age is maybe coming on, but there's Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Modern Age. That's the problem with modern age. Copper Age has been slipping in there,
and Copper Age was awesome.
I mean,
in the way that we talk about the Copper
Age. Take Secret Wars.
Hold on. Let's let Graphic Man go, then we'll go around. Yeah.
Take Secret Wars. Secret Wars, and before that, the Wolverine miniseries, like 1982. In my mind, Bronze Age is Conan the Barbarian #1. Yeah, that's your bronze. And I can't see Secret Wars being on equal footing with Conan.
It's bronze. Modern age.
Well, Copper, to me, modern is 93.
All I'm saying is Copper just hasn't been accepted yet.
Modern started with that Maximum Carnage stuff. Yeah. That's when I quit. I quit in 90.
I remember there were talks of calling the modern age after Secret Wars, basically wanting to call it the Image Age when Image started. That was a talk for a hot second of calling the age that.
Yeah.
Copper Age, I like the idea of Copper Age. I
call what's going on right now. And no one has to take my word for it. I call what's going on right now, I call it the plastic age, because today everything is speculation and slabbing. And so
I think it's say like 95% of it, I would agree.
So we have in metals of gold, silver, bronze, everything is getting lower and lower in a value, and now we're stuck with just a plasticky.
But here's something that's really interesting, Graphic Man, and I think maybe you guys will agree with this. It just struck me today, as a matter of fact. I was looking at Hip Comic. You guys ever been on hipcomic.com? They sell books and they have auctions. I recommend it. It's actually a pretty good place for buying and selling and stuff.
I've sold a few books on there myself.
Okay, so they're having this auction, right? And I look, and they have Batman number 1000, which was 2019, I think. They have like 10 different variants because they're covering the ages, right?
Right.
One of the Batman covers is a 1940s cover. I forget who the artist, but it's totally like the Joker, and he's got guns and he's aiming them at Batman and Robin. It's an awesome cover. It really I was just like, wow, I had never seen it before. Not all red. It's another guy.
He did one of them.
He did. He did. As a matter of fact, he did a Catwoman like coming out, and she's like smiling.
Okay.
I believe. But this one, it's just classic 40s. It's just got that. He's got it down. The artist has got it down, and so
rude. Yeah.
Well, maybe that's possible. I mean, they've got like one from Bernie Wrightson, although it was, of course, something from like the 90s that he did of Batman. But this one was really cool, and it was at auction, and there was like a couple hours left, and it was going for like $68. And I was like, wow, that thing has gone up. I like it. And so I started looking, as I always do when I'm interested in a book, and the art it's just fantastic in this book. You got to check it out. It's really great. The best, I think, of that series. And so then I go on eBay, and people are selling it for 20. and I'm going like in the same condition. And then I start thinking two things. What is the value of a comic book? Right. Well, the value of a comic book is obviously what you're willing to pay for it. That is really it's what somebody's willing to buy that comic book for. That's it. Because all of the speculation with modern comics is just total bullshit. It's complete. I have seen it. You see it over and over again. Like a movie comes out. The comic books, a few comic books soar in price. 2 years later, they just plummet because there is an artificial price hike that occurs. It is not that the value of the comic book is changed at all. It's just what people are willing to pay for it.
By the way, my father always told me that when I was a kid.
Yeah,
I said, this comic worth $20. Like it's worth
here's
whatever
the difference
for it.
If you look at Golden and Silver Age comics, that's not the case. That is value. That is real value. It's never going to change. It's like having gold and silver in your hand, because those values do not, for the most part, they continue to climb steadily.
Well, they're the blue chip stocks, not the
they're the blue. Right, exactly. That is precisely it. So there is value, obviously. It's just, as Graphic Man was just saying, there's so much speculation now with the modern comics. It just drives you insane. I mean, it just really gets to me. And so about this Batman 1000. Okay, so what they did is they put out different issues for the different time periods. Like they've got a 1940s Batman
each decade
cover.
They had a cover.
A 50s, a 60s, 70s, whatever. And I thought to myself, that's cool. They did that with Action Comics 1000 as well. Yeah. As you guys may recall.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that's really great. So that means, and this 1940s cover seems to be, from what I have researched, the most popular of all of these decades. Why? That's my question to you guys.
Well, you have your actual people who are actual comic collectors that feel a little bit of history. I think it's got the feel of the raw Batman, if you will. The sense of history with Batman. Obviously, it's a thousand, and it's just a guess. I mean, I feel like I'm talking like it's factual. It's just a guess. But you got number 1000, which is a benchmark of history. So then you've got people who normally don't buy Batman also coming in there being like, I want that one. It's got that nostalgic feel, that historic feel, and it's going all the way back, So I think it has to do with the sense of history with Batman.
And I think there's some covers that just capture people's imagination.
Yeah.
Like the Jock Joker cover on Batman, where he's made out of bats.
Yeah.
People love that imagery. It catches their imagination.
And of course, there's some Brian Boland covers,
Right?
That people just love of the
A few
Joker.
Wonder Woman ones. Yeah, there's
right.
no. I don't think you can predict it.
Incredible Hulk 340. With the
claws with the.
Yeah, and they've done that with Wonder Woman too. They've actually done Golden Age style Wonder Woman covers, as you guys have seen in the last few years.
Yeah.
To me, this indicates one thing. I mean, because there are, teenagers, there are 20-year-old kids buying these and loving these, going, hey, wow, this is the best design. Why is that? Why is that happening? That's really kind of what I'm getting at. It's not a thing. I mean, these kids are like, they're buying Batman. They were at most, they grew up with, Rob Liefeld and all these guys, and all. So what kind of makes them go, wow, this 1940s Batman cover is like the best of all of them? It just,
I'm gonna have to look that up.
It strikes a nerve or a chord or something in a kid that has no idea that. Or I'm not going to say that because I don't want to prejudge a kid. Maybe he's like a golden age nut. I don't know, but probably not. Probably not.
When you talk about the young ones, and all this stuff, you've got to get in their mindset that if they're 20, you got to look at comics from the last 10 years. That's what they get exposed to.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Spotlock tells us the cover's by Bruce Timm. It's an homage to a Jerry Robinson cover.
Oh, see, this is why this is why I love doing. This is why I love doing YouTube.
Thank you.
This is why I love doing YouTube, man.
Spotlock.
But when you look at these young guys, I hate to go rock and roll here, but the Ramones talked about their show. The Ramones grew up in the 60s, so they got to see the good bands, even how they walked on stage, Beatles, Who, and all that stuff, right? Well, these kids aren't seeing that. They're not seeing the classic masters. So when they get exposed to a master, you know what I'm saying? It blows them away, and they don't know why they like it. It's just they're getting quality now compared to what they've grown up with.
Bruce Timm.
I would also bet it would have to do with the coloring
as
well, because there's also a cover from the 50s which I'm attractive to, where it's all the various Batmans from all the crazy colors, but it's flat coloring. It's not muddy coloring of the modern age. It has a particular look that's classically comics that jumps off the page. And I would bet the kids who are buying it, I bet everyone who's buying it, is because it's a simple, I hate to use the word simple, but it is a simple design that's very effective.
Yeah.
Gives you the message, and there's a classic look to it that does not look old.
Yeah, right.
And that's
it doesn't look computerized. It does not. That is a huge thing. These computerized covers just really turned me off. I do not like computerized looking comics.
You might actually get a little sweet spot too, where the kids today, if it looks like it's from the 1980s, they go, "Oh, that's old." They don't want that. But if it's in the 40s, they may not equate that with old, because in their mind, something from the 80s, oh, that's from their dad's generation, or that's yucky. But the 40s might look cool to them.
Yeah.
So when I was growing up, I thought Charlie Chaplin was cool, but I might have thought something from the 50s was, that's Fonzie. Who cares about Fonzie?
God. See, Graphic Man, I love the 50s, so I get you.
You understand what I mean?
And it could be just the reality that the 40s and the 50s and the 60s were extremely cool. That's all there is to it.
Right.
And they were just great periods of time to be alive, to be born.
Whereas I'm old enough to think, well, to me, the 80s weren't old. Like Jared says, everything's just 5 years ago. That's not old. But to them, the 80s, that's ancient. But to them, the 40s, that's just something out of, some cool movie.
I've got to roll along now.
Later, brother. Good to see you. Have a good one.
All right,
Catch
yeah,
you
hey,
guys
it was a-
later. Have a good one.
Badger.
It was a
Bye-bye.
pleasure meeting you.
And I
Nice
should
to
probably
meet you.
I should probably skedaddle too. So
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to close the show with this, man. And like, if
All right.
you want to comment on it, that's cool.
Groovy.
We'll close it down. But, we got to talking about the young guys and all that stuff. They're finding their way. They're going to have their own thing, whatever they like and stuff. But Stranger Things, of all things, has shown me that if they went crazy over a Kate Bush song, the 80s would have been just too much for them to handle because that was a Tuesday. You know what I'm saying?
You're right. You're absolutely right. And guys, if you guys haven't seen it, remember to check out. It's Bruce Timm, the Bruce Timm cover to Batman 1000.
I actually think I got it.
It'll make you smile. It's just fantastic. It's just so great, man.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Wilson. You go right ahead.
No, I was going to
sorry.
say it has a Frank Spring type of
Frank Springer.
style. Frank
Yeah,
Springer type of
that's
style to it.
There we go,
That
Frank
cartoony,
Springer.
open, clean style.
I know what you're referring to. Yeah.
and dynamic, like really dynamic. It's really
Oh, yeah.
cool.
Fantastic, man. That's awesome. Well, guys, thanks for everybody that popped in here. Thanks for making this it's my favorite show.
Man, hey, I'd love to come back. If you have the nerve to have me.
Yeah. Well, Jared took the reins of this. I started this during COVID on Fridays, and then the way I work, I was just I'm just too out of it on Friday nights to really do this. But we'll do something. Don't worry, man. Yeah, but
so this isn't like an ongoing Friday night deal.
On Jared's, this show went from my channel to Jared's channel, and he's kind of took it over. Yeah.
Oh, I got you.
Yeah,
I got you. Okay.
But thanks for Graphic Man being here, of course, Paolo, and guys, I'm probably going to send out random links at some point on nights that I'm off, and we can do this again. Graphic Man, I hope you come back.
All right. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right.
And
Take
Will,
care. Have a
man,
great
just
weekend.
a joy, man. Just a joy, man. Love your stories, man. I do.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. God.
Everybody say bye.
Fantastic.
All
All right.
Bye bye.
everybody.
Adios.